Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out in the chilly weather tonight. I'd like to call to order the December 8th, 2021 Chaska Planning Commission for our monthly meeting. First item on the agenda is a roll call. Liz, please.
Commissioner Brass, Lacey,
Here.
Olson,
Here.
Seiler,
Here.
Riley, Urbanski,
Here.
and Chairperson Dalkey.
Here. Next, we would like to adopt tonight's agenda. Everybody had a chance to review. If so, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you.
I'll second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Agenda has been adopted. Next is our visitor presentation. Is there anybody in the audience that has anything they'd like to present that's not on the agenda for tonight? All right, I don't see anything, so we will move on to approving last month's meeting minutes, the November 10th Planning Commission meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? All right, and I didn't see anything, so I'll take a motion to approve those.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, and a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Tonight, there are no consent items on the agenda, so we will move right into our action items. Now, if you've seen the agenda tonight, 7A, it says public hearing canceled. Preliminary plat, site and building plan, preliminary plat and rezoning for West Creek Apartments, Community Asset Development Group, PC 2021-11. To be more clear, this is still on the agenda tonight, but it's no longer a public hearing. It's now a concept plan, which will come up later in tonight's meeting. So next we'll move on to 7B, to recommend the approval of the concept plan for Oak Creek and Cloverfield Apartments, DR Horton and Chaska Investments, PC number 2021-20. Commissioner Olson, I think you're going to set this one out.
I will.
Thank you, sir. And Liz, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here. Sorry, here we go. All right, thank you, members of the Planning Commission. We have a concept plan application in front of us this evening for the project known as Oak Creek, which was formerly known as Sagewood Third, and the Cloverfield Apartments project. This concept plan is being proposed by two different entities, one being DR Horton and the second being Chaska Investments. So I just want to iterate the process of planning that most projects go through within the city, as we have a couple different concept plans on the agenda this evening. With any land use application that comes in, or for most of them, there is a three-step process with the city, and that usually involves residential subdivisions, which would be the instance this evening, and other site plans and so forth. With the three steps, they both require Planning Commission and City Council review and approval. So the first step in the process is concept plan. So at this stage, it's a very high-level view of the project, more of an introduction to the project itself, and introduction to feedback and comments and concerns that are received both from staff, the public, and the Planning Commission and City Council. Once through that step, a project would move on to their preliminary plan. This is when the project gets more into the technical details of the plan and provides more of a code-specific analysis of the project. So we're looking at architectural, civils, and so forth, more so in that plan. And during that plan, it should be addressing most of the comments that are received during the initial step in the process at concept. Once through preliminary plan, move on to final plan, which is the third and final step. It is also a technical review, but it's more so finalizing the details that may be outstanding from the preliminary plan, so dotting i's and crossing t's at this point. So for all the applications that are on the agenda this evening, they are at concept plan review, so the first step in the process. So getting into this project and where it's located, I have a aerial exhibit shown on the screen here, indicating kind of both sites that are being looked at. They are located next to each other. One is owned by the Kelzer family, which is the area on the west side, and then the other site is located within the city of Chaska boundaries, just west of Clover Ridge Drive and south of the Twin Cities and Railroad train tracks here. I would also like to note, which you'll hear a couple other times in this presentation, that the site on the Kelzer farm land is located in the Laketown Township area. It is in orderly annexation area, so the city of Chaska does have zoning authority over this area and long-range planning. Also, just want to note some other adjacencies. So we do have other Clover Ridge neighborhoods that abut this overall project area. So we have Clover Preserve Second Edition, which is located on Sophia Drive and Sophia Circle, just to the east and south of the subject sites. And then we also have the first two phases of Sagewood. First edition is Cloverfield Circle. Second edition is the Clover Preserve Lane, Sagewood Court, and Sagewood Circle area. And both these streets stub off on that westerly edge there to gain access to the Kelzer property. These are just some zoomed in aerials. If we need to refer back to them for any reason, we have those here. In terms of a background, I'm not going to go too much into detail that's on this slide, more so just kind of chronologically putting in order the events that have taken place, more so on these sites in particular, and how they've been guided and planned throughout the years. But I'll start back at, or I'll note a couple pieces here with the Clover Ridge concept plan, which kind of guides most of this subject area, was approved back in 2000. May of 2000. And then Clover Preserve Second came in a couple years after that approval in 2002. And then also in 2002, our comp plan was amended to include the Kelzer Farm site in terms of how it was guided. So as you see it today, in terms of a long-range plan, is how it's been since 2002. And then it was back in May of 2018 is when we saw the first phase of Sagewood come through with their concept plan. The subsequent approvals after that, so the final plat for the first edition and the second edition, happened in October of 2018 and April of 2019. And then we did see an initial or original concept plan for this overall area that we're looking at, with the exception of the apartment site back in May of 2020. So at that time, it was known as Sagewood Third Edition. So again, an extension off of what's existing out there today. And they came through with a concept plan, and it was approved at that time. So during those May 2020 approvals, I'm showing the concept plan that was reviewed on this screen, showing the layout and so forth, to give us understanding of kind of where this project started. At that time, 83 lots were proposed on a total of 42 acres of land. A lot of concerns were posed during that initial concept plan, which all revolved around development access, more so the exploration of more access opportunities or alternative access opportunities for the development. So that would be a part of kind of what we're moving towards this evening. Another big concern or comment was traffic as well, tree preservation, and the impact it could have on school capacity. Going forward about a year and 6 months or so, they submitted their concept plan that we have this evening on November 8th. So that original concept plan is being showed this evening, or I'm sorry, on this slide here. And with that new concept plan, and again, most of the comments that were received during May of 2020, they chose to work on those comments for a good deal of time to try to address some of those pivotal concerns. So this evening, and with this November 8th concept plan, I just want to note some of those changes. So the big one being 107 lots on 52 acres of land. So there's a change in the amount of lots as well as the acreage of what's overall being looked at. So they've kind of widened the area of the development to show a new development access that would gain access onto Clover Ridge Drive. So this was in an effort to address that main concern of exploring different development access alternatives or opportunities for the development. They've been spending a lot of time on talking with the adjacent property owner, Chaska Investments, to see about getting another access onto Clover Ridge Drive that would provide additional means for the development into and out of the development. So with that, we see an addition of more lots, more area to help pay for the infrastructure improvement or infrastructure addition to the overall plan. With that, the apartment site that's been planned on Clover Ridge Drive is also a part of this concept plan this evening, and that was more so done intentionally to understand how this development access is laid out within their site, but also how it can impact or still show a viable site for an apartment use out there. So that is why both these projects are being combined this evening, and this request is to see how that all interacts and to see how the new development access would be in relation to the apartment site and if there's still a viable site available for that use. But it should be noted that this apartment site, although it is being proposed this evening, doesn't have any immediate plans to move forward in the near future of developing it. They still anticipate that this would happen a couple of years down the road, but they would like to set up initially kind of how this could lay out with this new development access proposed there. Another big change from the May 2020 concept plan is Sophia Drive does terminate into a cul-de-sac and has access to 6 individual lots from the development, whereas before this road extension carried through the full development. And then with tree preservation, compared to last time, they had more lots in this overall area that you can see here. The comparison with the concept plan that was originally submitted in November here went from 18 lots versus having 23 lots within that wooded area. So it has a lesser impact on the overall tree preservation, or a bigger impact on the tree preservation out there in terms of saving more trees. So before 38% of the wooded area was being saved, and now with this new plan, 51% of the wooded area is being saved. And the overall layout appears to be a lot better in terms of connecting with the existing tree preservation area of the second edition of Sagewood. And then there's little pockets for tree preservation scattered throughout. And after they submitted their initial concept plan with us, they did have a neighborhood meeting with the affected property owners of the project area. They conducted that on November 18th. So again, that was to show the new plan, get initial comments and feedback and concerns from the property owners that are adjacent. And The concerns that were raised out of that meeting, again, centered around traffic. And to address that right away, a traffic study will be required to be completed going into the next stage of things. But also to address that, the developer has provided a slight modification to their overall plan to hopefully try to pivot it in a direction that has a better traffic flow or address the concern that was raised, and I'll show that in just a mere moment here. Concerns on access in terms of how many access points there are into and out of the development. And then another big item of concern was the building height of the apartment proposed. So another modification or slight modification done since this meeting was the developer of that site did modify their section drawing showing kind of the exposure of levels on their western facade. So the underground parking area, both the levels were exposed on their section drawing, so they've been able to modify that just to show one level of parking to be exposed versus two, and I'll show that in just a moment here. And then I also want to make sure this is on record as well. We did receive some emails and concerns from adjacent property owners after this neighborhood meeting occurred, but well before or a little bit before our meeting this evening. So I just want to iterate that we've received that. We also shared copies of those concerns to the Planning Commission members just to instill that that is on public record. But those were received from, and I apologize if I mispronounce names, Ray Lindner, Kevin Wedlin, Stephen Oaxaca, Shan Donabalin, Nick Bruce, and Darnell Cage. So all of those should be included for the Planning Commission members. So getting into kind of those modifications that have been done since the neighborhood meeting on November 18th. The developer on the Oak Creek side of things has made a slight modification to the layout of the street system on their plan. This street right here, this north to south connector, basically got moved more internally here. So if we compare before, this street kind of went like that, kind of like an L-shaped, whereas now it's more internal. And the intention of doing that is to help provide more of a break in this connection system, so there's not a long, linear, contiguous street system here that would kind of promote people to come down and out through Clover Preserve Lane. So putting in this break here would essentially try to get the people on the north side here to kind of utilize that northerly access. So the older plan, kind of with this contiguous run of street here, showed 40 lots on it. So paring it down to kind of how many lots directly front this new stretch of street, it's only 20 lots. So hoping that would be a 20-lot difference in terms of a traffic flow piece. And then the modification to the Cloverfield apartment site is below. The original plan is shown on the left here, and then the modified plan is shown on the right. So the left is showing 2 exposed underground parking levels, whereas the newer plan only shows 1. And with that, you know, there's things that can still be worked on from an exposure standpoint and grading standpoint and screening standpoint to really try to cover up this area. And I'll go into more detail with that a little bit later on too. Getting to the comprehensive plan and the Clover Ridge concept plan of this area and how it laid it out to be, the comprehensive plan guides both sites or areas for low-density residential, high-density residential, and open space. So the proposal that we have this evening is consistent with that. And then with the Clover Ridge concept plan, it does guide both these areas for standard lot, single-family, and multifamily residential. And just iterating that, the proposal is also consistent with that. So the concept plan request that we have this evening is specifically for 107 single-family lots, and then a 162-unit apartment building. So getting into existing conditions of both of these sites, for the Oak Creek site, it roughly encompasses 52 acres of land. As I stated before, most of it's in an orderly annexation area of Laketown Township. So the city of Chaska does have zoning authority and long-range planning authority over that area. There is a creek that mainly runs north to south that kind of splits the property somewhat in half, but basically the wooded area is kind of on that easterly side of the creek, and then you have the farmland on the west side. So the significant tree areas of the site are mainly on that southeast area of the site. So these were analyzed to have some pretty significant trees in this area, mainly encompassed by oak trees, ranging in caliber inches from 20 inches up to 35 inches. So definitely beautiful, significant trees that flock that area. I also want to point out that there's a heritage tree, or what it's been dubbed as through the years. It's a large cottonwood tree that kind of falls just west of the creek area. It's one of the oldest, I think, in the state of Minnesota. So there's definitely some significance in keeping it, and they do plan to keep it, but just want to note it, that it's there and it will be preserved as they move forward with the plans. Street stubs occur on the east side of this property, so both at Clover Preserve Lane as well as Sophia Drive. And then the new northerly access, again, will kind of run parallel with the train tracks on the north side there. And then with the Cloverfield apartment site, the overall site that it encompasses is roughly 28 acres in size. However, the apartment site within that is only about 10 acres because there is a large wetland complex that has been delineated on the site, so much of that will be preserved. Getting into the Oak Creek site plan or layout that we're seeing this evening. So again, 107 single-family lots are proposed. They're being proposed at 65-foot wide lots. The overall layout, the main or one access comes off of the extension of Clover Preserve Lane to the east there. 6 lots come off of an extension in cul-de-sac from Sophia Drive. And then you have the northerly access point that connects into Romeo Court at Clover Ridge Drive. And this will, again, provide some internal systems within that area out to the street systems. I also want to note there's a couple farm access points denoted on this plan. So on the south side here and on the west side here. So the Kelzer Farm currently accesses and farms the property just to the southeast of this property. They have kind of their own driveway or farm access that kind of runs between both their properties here and gains access to their farmstead on the north side. So there is a point where they cross the railroad here. So with this new proposal, they kind of have to reroute their access, but it's very doable through what they've kind of have laid out. But both these points here are just 30-foot wide farm access points. They're not planned for roadway extensions. They're not dimensionally capable of that, as they're half the size of what we would require for that. But the Kelzer family do need that those access points in order to gain access back to their farmstead. And then with the Twin Cities and Western Railroad kind of being that northern edge here, there will be an important point centered around screening and what happens along this edge for the properties that directly abut, but also are within close proximity as well, how that edge really gets treated as they move on to the preliminary plan. The railway crossing at Clover Ridge Drive is a silent crossing, so the horns don't blow there, which is one plus, but you can definitely still hear and feel the train coming through, so it will be important to understand what is going to be done with those edges that directly abut. The developer has indicated that they will be exploring berming and landscaping along those edges. Another piece with this is they noted a private amenity area within the plan. It hasn't really been denoted, or the location hasn't really been fully defined, but they would like to do it somewhere pretty central in the site near the creek, possibly within the tree area to make it a nice place for people to be and utilize the area. So moving forward, they'll have to evaluate that more and provide more details in the preliminary. And then lastly, with the home styles proposed, I have a couple images of those on this screen. They are homes that have already been built in both the Sagewood additions, so it won't be anything different than what's already being seen out there. And then just getting into the tree component again, which I've kind of touched on. They did survey the trees out there, so a total of 207 trees were surveyed. Again, the significant ones really fall within the southeast area, where a lot of them are oak trees. So there was a lot of focus and significance in this area to try to preserve trees where possible. So they're already showing basically in red, what's circled in red, and shown in these outlot areas, what they plan or are going to focus on preserving. So those are both outlot areas, but some actually fall within private property lines as well. And then I just wanted to circle the heritage tree as it relates to their plan, so as you can see, it falls outside of their project limits. And a picture of that is included in the top right corner there. With this being in the Laketown Township orderly annexation area, in order for it to move forward onto preliminary plat and rezoning, it would have to go through a formal annexation process with both Laketown Township and the city of Chaska. So they will need to prepare and execute that as we start gearing up for the next step in the process. And with it being in the orderly annexation area of Laketown Township, it falls outside of the Jonathan Association limits. So technically speaking, it's not within the realm of the Jonathan Association. However, it's been a discussion in the past of whether or not these newer additions nearby Clover Ridge would be a part of the association. The first and second editions of Sagewood were not included, and the developer decided to put in their own private amenities as a part of that. This project in particular, like any other project nearby Jonathan Association, we encourage discussion between the developer and the Jonathan Association in terms of whether that discussion or being a part of the association is in their best interest. But that is not a city decision on whether or not they do end up being in the association, but the developer has been actively speaking with the association and will continue to moving down the road. They have indicated that they would like to create their own HOA, but again, the discussion with Jonathan and kind of how they want to proceed forward is up to the developer moving forward. And then getting to the Cloverfield Apartments project, the overall site that they're looking at is mainly on that easterly edge or northeasterly portion of the actual site, which is about 10 acres of area. So they are proposing an apartment building there totaling 162 units, 4 stories tall. The layout is such that the front of the building is facing Clover Ridge Drive, or the main entrance point to the building is facing Clover Ridge Drive, as well as the parking lot, and access is shown there. And then a secondary access to the apartment site is shown off of that proposed northerly access road. They are showing parking that does meet our ordinance requirements for an apartment building, so there's no issues there. They're showing to meet that. In terms of the overall style of the apartment building, they're looking at a flat roof styled building, much like the Lake Jonathan Flats building that's over just west of Highway 41 and north of Pioneer Trail. And with any apartment building or multifamily project, there is a level of design and materials that's required as a part of that type of use. So they'll have to show in the preliminary how they meet that. And in addition to that, they'll have to show how they meet our usable open space requirement, which speaks to outdoor amenities such as patios, rooftop patios, trails, or anything that can be utilized by the residents of the facility on the exterior. And then getting back to the height, so again, it's 4 stories on that front grade entrance. When you get to the back of the building or the west side, with the grade changes there, they're proposing 5 stories in back. So again, getting to the concern about height and so forth, they've indicated that they would like to put a patio function out here, which would try to go level with kind of the natural grade there. But around the corners of the building, there's probably potential to manipulate the grade a little bit to kind of hide those corners, so that hopefully minimal areas of the building can be covered up. And in addition to that, landscaping and sometimes berming can kind of help hide some of those areas as well. But certainly something to work on as they move forward. And I just want to reiterate again that they're going through concept plan approval at this time, but there's not intention for it to move forward immediately. So it might be a couple years, a year or two, until this comes back for its preliminary and final. So just want to touch on the pieces that we would like both these projects to work on for their preliminary submittal. I think the biggest piece is obviously the traffic and completing a traffic study for both the Oak Creek site, but also the apartment site too, to understand how that really impacts the overall system. And coupled with that, we always like to see a construction access plan or an understanding of what's anticipated for that, so that can be thought out as best as possible. In terms of pedestrian connections and private amenities, just working on establishing those systems on both sites so that there's continuity there, there's good connections to kind of the nearby amenities, nearby facilities such as the school, and working on what they provide for their residents, whether that's a private playground area or a patio area on the back of the apartment. Those will be details they'll have to work out in the preliminary. And with the design of the apartment, focusing on 360-degree architecture with the building being very well exposed, and then also addressing the screening and exposure on the west facade. And then also working towards a buffer plan or a screening plan for the lots that abut the Twin Cities and Western Railroad. So with that, we are asking you to make a motion this evening to recommend approval of the concept plan for Oak Creek and Cloverfield Apartments, and then that would be based on the conditions that are listed in the staff report. Happy to answer any questions. I know both applicants are here as well, if you have specific questions for them.
All right, thank you, Liz. Any commissioners have any questions for staff?
Yeah, Liz, I'll start
Can we
off. Does the orderly annexation continue on, Oak Creek's concept? Does it continue west all the way to Victoria Drive?
Yes, it does. Yep.
So the previous concept and this concept both have, no ability to continue this neighborhood going west. So the orderly annexation then from Victoria Drive, eventually, if anyone ever wanted to develop that, they have to find a different access to that part of the property.
Right, yep.
Liz, so the residential is, single-family lots are looking at getting developed first, the apartment somewhere down the road. Would that road then, along the railroad tracks, be developed as part of the first phase?
Yes, it would. It would be a part of primarily the single-family development.
And we don't have the construction plans yet, they're always that preliminary, but I would assume that would be the preferred construction route where we would want them to put that road in, and that would be the guiding road to get all construction in and out.
That would be ideal, yes.
You can provide direction to that
Right.
when you get to that.
Any other questions by us? All right, the developer is here. Would you like to say anything before I open it up to questions? And if you would give us your name and address and everything, you know the drill.
Mike Sewell with DR Horton, 20860 Cambridge Court, Lakeville, Minnesota, 55044. Thank you for having us here again tonight. We were here 18 months ago roughly and had a conversation on this where you gave us the approval of the concept plan we had back then, but you gave us some strong direction that we should work on another access point. So we've been working the last 18 months with the family, the Clover family, the Chaska investment to see if we could come up with a route out to the north, and what you see tonight is what we came up with. The Clover family has been patient and waiting for this to go forward. They've waited for their turn to come and to develop and to pay off the assessment that was put against their property, so they would like to eventually move forward so they can get that debt or obligation off their property and off their family's mind. So we're hoping that this will go forward. I think Liz did a really nice job of laying out the differences. The one thing that I will say is the reason we took Clover Preserve across is that's where the sewer and water's going across, so we're already disturbing that part of the world, so that's why the road went there. And Sophia had some trees and some wetlands at the end, so we decided to cul-de-sac that. The residents will give you the neighborhood residents will give you their feedback, and then we'll wait for some feedback and direction from you on what you think about access, and we'll move forward. As you can see, we continue to try to respond to the feedback. Our planner and our engineer from Westwood are here listening. They were here at the neighborhood meeting. Ms. Ridgway cannot be here tonight, another person at DR Horton, she's online, so we're hoping by listening to more feedback, we'll continue to work on our plan and come up with something that keeps improving. With that, we're more than willing to take questions.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate the differences between the two plans. It does show that you put a lot of hard work into this. We will take feedback from anybody who would like to present your name and address, and just, we have a lot of things tonight, so just I would recommend that if you were planning on getting up and the person ahead of you or a couple people ahead of you said what you were going to say, that, consider that said. So otherwise we can go on all night, so. But we do want to hear your feedback and concerns. That being said, I should be quiet and let you talk. Go ahead.
Okay. Mike Benson, I represent Chaska Investment Limited Partnership, 10118 Wild Duck Pass, Eden Prairie. Thank you all. Thanks for listening tonight. Thanks Liz and Kevin for facilitating the relationship with D.R. Horton. As a backdrop, this piece in Clover Field is one of the last pieces, I believe, that needs to be developed. So we're hoping for a win-win from everybody, or for everybody, and happy to field questions.
Thank you. Appreciate that. At this point, anyone else? Come on up.
Hello, my name's Ray Lindner. I live at 1401 Clover Preserve Lane in Chaska. I'm the first house on the end of Clover Preserve Lane as you go into the development. So, I provided a deck to the council and to the commission and to plant staff with multiple concerns that I think are representative of a large majority of my neighbors here. So I put this together and I just wanted to walk through some of these main points. As we've gone through this development and looked at this expansion, the one thing that really struck everybody, I think, when we came back and saw the new revised plan was the elimination of the access at Sophia and driving all of the access basically through Clover Preserve Lane. And I know they've built the north access point, which is an additional plus, but you still have only one residential access going into this neighborhood from an existing neighborhood. And I think the commission needs to take a look at that and understand why is that different and why is Clover Preserve Lane different than Sophia or Clover Preserve Circle on the other side, which we closed off with the Sagewood 2 development. I've heard multiple discussions too related to the size of the development. The increase in the number of units is significant. And then the impact of traffic flow. And one thing that was left off the notes from the last meeting was multiple concerns that the residents raised about safety for children that are going to be on Clover Preserve Lane and having their having all that traffic going down Clover Preserve Lane. So those were some of the main points. From the standpoint of the density changes, I think those are pretty straightforward, so I won't spend much time there. The traffic flow and the access changes, even if with the addition of the stub that they've put in, there's still a very significant amount of traffic that will likely utilize Clover Preserve Lane to exit to go to either 212 via Clover Preserve Drive, or exit to get to Hunter Mark Road, or to Clover Ridge Elementary School. So or to the high school. If you look at that and you look at the number of trips per day, I just did 4 per day for all the houses that will be down there. It's at 4 per day at 75,000 trips a year that'll go through that route. At 10 per day, which is the planning normal, it's significantly greater. So I think we're talking about adding a significant amount of traffic to this area onto a main thoroughfare, which is Clover Preserve Drive, that in the 2018 study, when they expanded and did Sagewood, was already nearly full capacity in that study. So I'm looking forward to the follow-up traffic studies, and I hope they're reflective of real-life traffic and not maybe the COVID traffic we have today. But even with COVID traffic, I counted the number of trips from my house just today, which was a non-eventful day, and we had 10. So it's a real number. and I think the impacts need to be considered by the commission. So I would ask you to clearly direct that that be done, and that we also have real consideration to the impact that that will have to the residents of Clover Preserve Lane. The other part that I would like to make sure is done is that the statements about no building to the west or to the south that connects to this neighborhood, there are 30-foot access points that are provided, and I understand that city planning would be 60 or 54 for a street. But this is preliminary plan, and things can change. So zoning changes, everything can change. So I'd like the city to direct that there will be no connectivity into this from other areas. If we look at safety concerns, not only do we have safety concerns for the kids that live now, and there's a lot of little kids that live in Clover Preserve Lane now. I've been there 15 years, and I now have a whole new set of neighbors that are great neighbors, and I really appreciate what they are providing to the neighborhood. It's a very diverse neighborhood. We have a lot of different people and cultures, and I think it's great. It's been a great addition to the neighborhood. I will go back and talk a little bit later about the removal of hundreds and hundreds of trees, but where we ended up now, given that we did that decision a few years ago, is where we are, so there's not much we can do about that now. The Clover Preserve Lane access, if you look at it, butts up to Clover Preserve Circle. I think it's what it is, neighbors, Clover Preserve Circle. And you enter there at a three-way intersection where all this traffic will come through. You come down, and Clover Preserve Lane is right in the middle between their cul-de-sac that runs there, and they have two access points there, which is not the best type of intersection to go through, because in the morning when there's people coming in and out, you have to look both ways. You got three things going on, and you have curves coming from both sides of that intersection also, because that intersection really doesn't appear to have been, and one of the reasons I bought there was that it really wasn't built to handle a large amount of traffic on that road. So that is one risk point. The other one that we look up is you have two playgrounds on Clover Preserve Drive and on Hunter Mark Road. That one of them on Clover Preserve Drive is designed for small kids. The other up on, which is, we call it the yellow park, and the green park up on, up by the school, closer to the school, is more for the kids, which there's a lot of kids that run around there unaccompanied, because they're a little bit older, 12, 13-year-old kids. So there's access issues there. And if you've ever been to Clover Ridge Elementary in the morning, the cul-de-sac where the kids cross is a zoo for about an hour or a half hour. And the traffic that goes down Hunter Mark Lane there also backs up on Hunter Mark. And some people had asked me to make sure I brought that up when I talked to you guys. All the way down to Hunter Mark to Super American Highway 41, that traffic backs up. And the impacts of this housing development in general is going to put more load on all of those streets. So I think I've covered that. I think we covered the future expansion concerns. The other item that I would like to talk about is just this equity of planning. To me, being a resident, longtime resident, this is really the primary issue that I have with the current plan, is that we have closed off Sophia Drive now in this plan. We have closed off Cloverfield Circle in Sagewood 2 development, and now we have everything going down Clover Preserve Lane. This is an environmental impact from a quality of life standpoint for all of us that live on Clover Preserve Lane. And I would ask you to have a very serious consideration as to why Clover Preserve Lane is not truncated with a cul-de-sac also. I understand utilities need to go through there, but you can put utilities under plain dirt. You don't have to have a street to run the utilities through. Granted, you will dig it up and you're gonna have to go through there, but you can create the byway there. We can put walking paths over top of it, which can be easily replaced if you need to get in there and do work. There seems to be no reason why we can't terminate that off. One of the concerns that was raised to, or mentioned in the town hall meeting was a need for second access to the new development. But if you go look, and I did some research by looking just on Google Maps and looking around the neighborhood, there are multiple neighborhoods in Chaska that have single access points that are more than the number of houses that will be in, if we were to isolate that off and have the traffic go out the north entrance. So I don't think that holds necessarily. You also have the option of allowing access out to the north or to the south, if you wanted to, on future expansion. So you could build stub streets that would be in the new development that would be planned to go out to the north through the annexation that you mentioned, Commissioner Selly. So those were pretty much my main points. I think the last point, I guess, would be just to talk about the trees a little bit. I have pictures, and I think I'll talk about the trees in a different concept than maybe what some will talk about. The development of Clover Preserve, when I moved in 15 years ago, was a new development. I had lived on Hunter Mark Road for 7 years before that, in Alexander Circle. And we moved to Omaha, and when we moved back, we were more than happy to come back and move directly back to where we were. We moved literally a half mile down the road. And the one thing that really struck us about the development of Clover Preserve was that not only were we building new development on property that needed to be developed, the Kelsers, I totally understand their scenario that they're in, but it was done with a sense of bringing nature back into the area too. The wetlands, the restoration of those wetlands, etc. That has always kind of held up as I've seen development happening in the area. But a couple years ago, when we approved Clover Preserve Lane going in with the Sagewood 2, we eliminated hundreds of trees. We're talking about trying to save 50, 60 trees in this new, with the change of not running the road through there. We eliminated hundreds and hundreds of trees to put Clover Preserve Lane in. I provided pictures. You have them in the material. And so when we talk about preserving a few trees, I don't think the heart's in it. We let hundreds, we had a beautiful stand of full growth oak and maples that we could have run paths through. We could have done all kinds of beautiful things with that, and we chose not to. So I would ask you to really think hard about what we're doing on the west end, because that stand of trees is still there. There's a creek there going through there. There is an option here to create a nice environmentally friendly space that people can still preserve and enjoy. So I would ask that to be considered very strongly by the commissioners as you look at what the options are for this development. Once again, I go back to the equity on the planning side here, and the fact that we have teed off all the other access points except for Clover Preserve Lane. So I ask for your consideration of what we can do to make that happen so that we can eliminate the ongoing flow of traffic through that neighborhood. I have property there. I have property values and value concerns, just like every other person in this room, just like the Kelsers do about getting out of their assessment that they've been given. And just like D.R. Horton wants to make money on building new houses, right? So I think this can work out for everybody, but I would ask you to please consider this and put some strong direction, because you're probably going to approve this preliminary, or the concept, but please put some strong direction for the people in the planning organization and the developers to really consider what can be done related to the access to the neighborhood. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else?
Hello, Steve Oaxaca, 2751 Clover Preserve Court, Chaska, 55318.
Did you say Steve?
Steve.
Okay.
Steven's okay, but prefer Steve. So I'm not going to reiterate all the great points that Ray made just a few minutes ago. But one thing that I would add an additional comment to when it regards to the equity of planning is when Liz was presenting the issues around the tree preservation and the heritage tree, and where the strongest concentration of trees were, they were right at the end of Clover Preserve Lane. And it makes no sense if we're talking about tree preservation to extend that lane and cap Sophia. If you look at the tree concentration, you would do it the other way. Now, I would prefer to cap both of them because I think it makes more sense to route the traffic out through that north lane so it can connect with Angler so that you're directing traffic away from the overly taxed Clover Drive, which is overly taxed, particularly in the mornings and going through that roundabout that Ray mentioned also. So I think if we are serious about the preservation of trees and the preservation of that heritage tree, we would cap Clover Preserve Lane and extend through Sophia, but a better solution would be to cap both Sophia and Clover Preserve Lane and route all the traffic through the north end. That would alleviate many concerns, and I think there's probably a way to draw up a plan such that you preserve the number of houses and the number of lots that could be developed, because there's obvious economic reasons why we would want to do that at the same time. So that's a clarification on the point I wanted to make and not reiterate everything that Ray said. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pablo Murillo. I'm 1466 Clover Preserve. I thank you for your time, and I spent my life giving services and doing some development, some design in many countries. I'm still in Minnesota. I love this place. We have a very solid, uniform, fair coalition of all the neighbors that I've been connected to, and I'm at the board of the association. And Ray, thank you for the amazing work. I don't know, you must have a very passive, very patient wife. This is just maybe emphasizing 3 points. I heard more words about trees and tree preservation. I remember when we were doing some bluffs in West Bloomington, and we had to go through some very serious situations there with some native owned land. So trees are important, but I think children's safety is much more important. And we have a group here of over 100 of us right now that could be probably higher. That not only are we going to be happy to work with you, but if this doesn't seem to go in a fair way, we're prepared to take a different route and be a little bit more persuasive. We think that when we spent half of the meeting talking about an apartment building that has access right up the road, I like apartment buildings, but we're talking about children and families and pets. Please, let's take this to the heart and really keep the wonderful reputation this city has developed since Mr. David Pacorni and some wonderful gentlemen that we've worked with, we had the pleasure to work with in the past. This is the city we chose, and we're here to cooperate. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Thompson, 2721 Clover Preserve Court. I'd like to thank my neighbors for the points they made. I won't talk about the same points. I'll just strongly second them because I do.
Say your first name again, please?
Kimberly?
Kimberly.
Kimberly, okay.
Sorry.
I didn't hear that
I just had a couple questions. For the apartment complex that's being proposed, do we have any ideas about the tenants that'll be targeted? Is it going to be senior living, general population, Section 8, are any of those decisions known?
I think from what we know, it's just going to be general population. It wasn't targeted to any specific group.
Okay, great. Good to know. I see that, obviously Chaska's growing. We have a lot of development plans in progress here. And I'm just curious what the total population growth we're expecting with all of these plans in terms of number of residents, including children. I was just curious if there's been any thoughts to whether or not we have, the emergency response systems to support that growth. Hear a lot of things in the news about how taxed and strained first responders are today. I'm just curious if consideration has been made to that and whether or not we would be over constraining our resources and putting ourselves in some sort of a safety situation. So I just would like you guys to review that as well.
And I can tell you that emergency services, police, fire, they're included in talks and the developments of any of the plans that go in. Just to help you with that. All right, thank you, Kimberly. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm also a neighbor, Kevin Wendland, 2731 Clover Preserve Court, 20-year resident of the area there. A couple things. One was a misstep by the commission by not informing Clover Preserve Court of what's going on. We're just at the end of Clover Preserve Lane, and of course it's Kimberly.
The horseshoe road there?
That's that little horseshoe there. Kim, Kevin Thompson, and Stephen Nanohaka, the Lees, and then the Jackmans. It's a 5-house unit. Of course, with the new Sagewood, which I can't remember exactly how many houses there, 44 or something like that. My background is civil engineering, just like Ray mentioned. The average when I went to school back in the 80s was 8 round trips a day. Now I think it's up to 10 a day, so 44 times 10, 440 trips a day. I could turn my cell phone on, the flashlight, and beam 440 shots, into your eyes, and that's kind of what we're experiencing in that court there. We were left out of that whole process, and obviously adding 107 new units times 10 trips a day would be 1,070 plus the 500 or 400, that's 1,500 trips, a day shining their lights into our eyes. So that would be one thing that is kind of an issue for us. Of course, the school-age kids, every day now, 20 years, our kids are all grown up, but the new residents, as they had mentioned, are Clover Ridge Elementary School kids walking to school down the sidewalks. And this morning in front of the Lee's house, I see the kids, looking left, looking right, taking one step out, taking one step back, taking one step out, cars zip by, and they run across. It's like, you can't add another 1,500 cars and expect that to be a safe situation there. Let's see, also Sophia, I don't know what happened, but at the end of Sophia is nothing. It's a wetland. So any cars going down Sophia, those headlights shine into a wetland. Coming down Clover Preserve Lane, they shine into our horseshoe area there. Now, I had emailed you, I got an email from Ray with the people that live on Clover Preserve Lane. And you can probably tell by the representation here, it's more of a minority or ethnically diverse group. And historically, it's an issue when a minority or people of color areas have a road ram through their neighborhood, and it's just the optics don't look good. Let's put it that way. So anyways, those are some of my concerns with not being informed, traffic, and just the optics of having Sophia blocked off, but the new diverse neighborhood being opened up to the brunt of the traffic. So, thank you.
This is Byung-hak Lee. I am living in the 5 houses Kevin just mentioned.
Can you give us your address, please? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry about
Name and
that.
address?
2711 Clover Preserve Court. I am living in the cul-de-sac. It's at the intersection of Clover Preserve Lane and the Clover Preserve Drive. So my name is Byung-hak Lee. So I didn't plan to speak today, but the point my neighbors are making is so resonate to me. So I'd better bring up my concern about this issue. So when I wake up in the morning, first thing what I do is open up my blind, check the weather, and directly I can overlook is that intersection areas. That's at the time when the dozens of kids, so their parents and carrying hands and some dogs are coming up and standing along that areas. So, and the cars are coming straight and turning around, and as my concerns is building up. And a couple of days ago, actually, when I look over, there's a school bus left, and one mom is holding kids, didn't cross the street. So at the time, car is coming from the Clover Preserve Lane. He intended to take a left onto the 100-mark areas. So there's some accord moment. So probably drivers expected mom gonna cross first. And probably mom thought car will go first. So there's some accord at the moment, and probably drivers think he had better go first. At the same time, mom thought it's gonna work, cross like that. So I thought, oh, that's the very scary moment, but it's happening. So it's and another issue is nowadays when I come out of my cul-de-sac, I think I need to turn right, left or right. So never happened. It's the past 18 years I lived. So that much traffic concern is probably, so it's getting more issue. So I think only Clover Preserve Lane as exit one is that's going to aggravate the issues very until something happens. So I think we had better from the beginning very clear about the situation, safety first issues. Yes, right. So that's my point. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else?
Hey, my name is Chris Dion. I'm at 1457 Clover Preserve Lane, and love the turnout from our neighborhood, certainly our community. I think community is a big part of what everyone is getting at here today. Trees, PowerPoints, investors, DR Horton, all aside here. I think it's important as you guys go in to deliberate, but what you're going to do with this is take a real good look at the people that are here who have invested in the community, have come together as a new neighborhood, and have formed and melted into what I'm finding to be a phenomenal experience for my small children, for other kids' small children. It's us that are the coaches of these youth teams. It's us that are paying the taxes. It's us that are spending the money at the small businesses that continue to run Chaska. There's dollars to be made all over the place. My only ask is that you simply consider the folks that are asking for the favor are the ones that are investing here with their lives and their families. The people that are looking to make a dollar, they're not even living in the community. They're not delivering a holy grail of anything. That's my only comment. That's it.
Thank you. All right, anyone that hasn't been at a point covered yet?
So I'm Wade Sorensen from Sophia Drive. I've been almost 18-year resident on Sophia Drive. I do have a few diagrams here that I'd like to give you guys. If I can.
You can do that.
So, the first page, the colored diagram, that is the original Clover Preserve concept plan. That was referred to, I think May 15th of 2000 when this was approved. This is, again, before the Kelzer agreement was done, right? So this diagram will show the western extension that should have been, that's what was planned for. That's the size of the roads that you have in Clover Ridge. On the north side, you will see where the apartment complex is being proposed right now. On the far, far north side of the railroad tracks, it does say apartments. On the south side of the railroad tracks, it says multifamily. In this diagram, that context refers to townhomes. So when the comments were made that it was always planned to be apartments there, that's not exactly correct. Okay? So it has not always been planned to be an apartment building. So I want that to be clear. Also, the size of the apartment building that's being proposed is gigantic. The single floor of the complex is 45,000 square feet. It's over an acre of square footage per floor. Now, ultimately, in the next rounds, when they come to for their preliminary next, we'll have to look at the floor area ratio. I mean, they're already looking at, I think, well over 0.5. So it's probably, again, that shows that this thing is far too big for the lot, right? This thing is going to tower over the whole development. It's not going to look right. Think Cloverfield Apartments. Those have a square footage of 18,000 square feet. This is 45,000 square feet per floor, just to put it in context. So this is a gigantic structure, I think 360 feet long by 180 or something, 200 feet. It's huge. So just consider that it does not fit into this development. My second question is, what happens to the remaining wetland when this is done? So the one page I attached, back in 2002, when Clover Preserve Second Edition was approved, that's Sophia Drive, two of the stipulations were that one was Outlet B, which is the mailbox station, was deeded to the Johnson Association. That was done. The second stipulation was Outlot A, which is the wetland, was supposed to have been deeded to the city. And that was not done. I would like to know why that was never done, why the city doesn't already own the wetland. Because one of the key reasons here is, could anything be changed out there at any given point? The sidewalks around the perimeter have been poorly maintained. There's, the snow is never removed. There's tons and tons of cracks in the sidewalk. So I need to understand what's going to happen with that wetland, right? Is that going to stay, one of the documents states that the comprehensive plan is essentially irrelevant. It's not binding. It doesn't mean anything. That was put in the content. So that green space has been called green space for the last 20 years. And suddenly there are houses being put out there. So again, what is the plan for that green space? What is the extent that it could be developed? And what's going to happen to it once the apartment comes in? I would like to see those answers as well. Thank you.
All right, is that it from our guests? All right. I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion.
I have two questions, one for the developer and the second one for both the developer and the neighborhood group. To DB Horton, will the traffic study that is to be done, you've heard some of the concerns about traffic and safety and access. Might the results of that traffic study guide any of the decisions and considerations for what you've heard tonight from this neighborhood group?
We engaged with a traffic engineer and he started laying out some preliminary locations, and a lot of them are based on the original Sagewood when we were here 18 months, and we've worked with city staff on choosing them. As one of the neighbors mentioned, that there's been the COVID change to the world, so we've held off on the traffic study because you directed us 18 months ago to do one, so we've been holding off, and we're going to move forward with one. We know the world's not completely back to the way it was, and maybe it'll never get back to that way. And when we receive the traffic information, we'll take that back in, we'll share it with city staff, and from there, we'll decide or look at if there needs to be adjustments to our site design. So yes, it will help us decide what to do. The struggle is with talking to the traffic engineer, as the neighbors well allude to, everybody wants to get to 212 to move east. You have Hunter Mark, you have Pioneer, and you have Clover Ridge Drive that folks want to migrate to. And so we've been trying to work our design to push as much traffic to the north. And because our traffic engineer believes if we can get more traffic out through the north access, they'll go out through Pioneer, which will help alleviate Hunter Mark and Clover Ridge Drive. So we're trying to do that, and we'll continue to evaluate the information as the traffic study comes back to see if there's other ways to do that. But some of it is based on directions we receive from you, the city council, and city staff on how accesses should be out there, and we'll take all that in and work with our traffic engineer to come back with something.
Yeah, and my second question to both the neighborhood group and to the developer, how often have you all got together? And I mean, I heard a lot tonight and both, you know, presentations. Have you heard all of this before? Have you shared this before? Because, I mean, we've had groups before that were on different sides, but development does happen. You know, it's one of the realities of the world. But they went back and got together. Sometimes it's pretty difficult to sort this out at this juncture. But in your own space, at your own time, getting together, and I don't expect the neighborhood to be your design and developer or vice versa, but, you know, traffic safety, all of those things are very important elements. And I would just recommend and implore you to spend a little more time together and work, you know, discuss and work some things out, so when you come back here, since it's at the concept phase right now, before it gets any farther. So a suggestion.
Which is the meaning of the concept plan versus preliminary versus final. Concept plan is usually the developer's best attempt at what they've been guided by the neighborhood and city staff and the planning commission and city council. And I believe that they've done that so far. And the point of this meeting tonight and presenting the concept plan is to take further comments. And as Commissioner Lacey said, more meetings can certainly happen. And that's the reason for a concept plan.
I mean, we've seen it happen, and it's been amazing when it does, when they come back and it's worked out. And everybody doesn't get everything they want, but the lines are a lot closer, you know.
Yeah, so I'd love to address your question. Do you want me to say my name and address?
Yes.
My name is Cassandra Koenig. I live at 1478 Sagewood Circle. So I'm a cul-de-sac off of Clover Preserve Lane. To your question about the meetings that we've had, so we bought our lot in February of 2020 and moved in September. When I moved in, there was still a significant portion of our neighborhood that wasn't done. We had our very first meeting to understand what does the next phase of all of this, what does our association look like when did we have that? A couple of months ago. So we've only had a few chances. We as a neighborhood have talked about it quite a bit, and we got that very first concept plan, and then got a letter in the mail that said, hey, we're having a meeting on Wednesday of this week, and here is the new plan. So I think what we're all here to do is just say, we're not saying we don't want the development of this new neighborhood. It is certainly great for our community, but what it's not representing is what we were told, what we signed our contracts when we were ready to build with D.R. Horton. We didn't buy lots to be a part of 100 Mark Highway, Major Street. We bought those because it is a beautiful area of Chaska where we want to be to have our neighborhood. So we are all here and happy to be a part of any meeting that we can. To your point, we know we won't get everything we want, but there is certainly room for things that we could change to the concept plan that we were originally shown. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
I guess one thing I want to,
Could I
Oh.
add one thing?
Sure.
Ray Linder again. I was wondering if you could pull up my deck and go back to the tree pictures at the end of it, just so people can see what I'm talking about. And, I mean, I like D.R. Horton. It's been great fixing sod in my yard when the trucks ran over it. I do have a busted sidewalk I want to talk to you about. But, and to that point, construction traffic, there was a couple of things I wanted to talk about on construction traffic. I do have a busted up sidewalk in front of my yard, and on my yard. I can't prove that a truck ran over it because the truck tracks went out, but I can tell you that there were very large equipment unloaded on my street in front of all of our houses that live there for about 6, 7, 8 months. I mean, huge trucks parked at exactly the spot where all these kids are going to be getting on to go to school right now. So routing any construction traffic down through Clover Preserve Lane, if you go forward with this build and you have the connection there, is not an option. You have to make the traffic go north. And I think staff mentioned that they could do that. And I just want to make sure that that's not an optional directive, that's a directive from you guys. I think it's important. When if you can flip forward just a, sorry, I would drive, but I don't have to. Well, so that one right there.
This one?
Yeah. One more back. So this is my neighbor's lot. This is right out my front door, looking at my front door. All of these trees were there when we built here, and this is part of the big grove of trees that was eliminated. When we had our meetings prior to Sagewood going in, Sagewood 2, I guess it's called now, and the building of Clover Preserve Lane, we made requests, and Sophia Drive made requests about trees being preserved and things being done with that grove of trees. The people that lost out the most are my neighbors, Ryan and Shannon Melville. We asked and we wanted for them to save a half a lot, just a half a lot, to save this grove of trees that backs up to Shannon and Ryan's house. They asked, we talked, it didn't happen. It was a half of a lot. An easement you could have put in with no thing. They said, we'll look at it, we'll think about it, and then if you go to the next slide, maybe down one more, no, up a couple, I guess. That's what happened. In 1 week, all those trees disappeared. We had a golden opportunity, and we just let it go because we wanted to put houses in. We could have had Clover Preserve Lane going with houses down one side, just like Sophia is, where they have the wetland on one side. We could have had a huge old-growth oak and maple stand there. We didn't choose to do that. So when you talk about Commissioner Lacey, you say, have we had community meetings? We've had meetings. And I'm happy to have more discussions. I'll host the dang thing in my backyard. It's a little cold right now, but I'll do it. But I think part of this is it's the responsibility of the commission and the council to think forward about what are we doing with planning in our city and what environment are we creating. Like I said before, I moved out here because I like being able to walk the loop around the wetlands that weren't there before. You can go back and look at the satellite photos. They weren't there. All of that's been restored. It's beautiful in our neighborhood, and people like the neighborhood, and that's what we moved out here for. So thank you for your time again.
Brian?
Yes.
There are 2 people on Zoom that have their hands raised. I don't know who raised their hand first, but I just want to imply that there's a couple more people who want to speak before you go into
All right.
your own discussion.
I'm not sure if Kevin's handling this or if,
Michelle?
are these the 2 presenters or 2 that want to comment that are on the screen?
Looks like Jeremy is unmuted, so we'll let him speak first.
All right. Go ahead, Jeremy. Jeremy, are you as close to your mic as you can be, or?
We might need our own audio turned up. If, Michelle, you can turn up our audio in the room. Not
About the same.
better.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeremy. We'll listen. We probably know what you want to talk about anyway, so.
Yeah, it's hard to hear.
Can't hear you right now, Jeremy.
Again.
Now we can.
It just went out for a little bit, so we'll let Brian sit and,
It's better?
well, he's back on, yeah.
Oh, okay. She's working on it. Thank you, Jeremy.
Mark, you can go.
Mark, if you,
Thank you for waiting.
all right. Thank you, Mark. Okay.
Sorry. Could I just ask one more question? Related to the farm access roads, the couple of areas that have been put in for Kelsers to access the farm, what kind of equipment is going to be moving through the neighborhoods? Because now there is no, I mean, they used to have an access over the railroad track back there, but now there won't be. So all that, it's going to have to come through that northern entrance, or it's going to have to come through from the south, which means it's going to come down Clover Preserve Lane. So I don't know how to, I don't know who to ask about that.
On
but
traffic,
it's
on
important.
traffic.
Yeah, I can't respond to the equipment aspect, but they are looking at relocating their railroad, or where they cross the railroad, because that will have to move westerly. And that's why the farm access points are shown where they are, because it'll still, I might just bring up an exhibit here because it's easier to explain, but they're looking at a rerouting of that versus going all the way through the northerly access, so that it's more direct to their farmstead. And I can generally show kind of what they're looking at.
Yeah, that would make
Just
more
give me a
sense.
second.
They have a railroad crossing to the west, though. Why would they need access to it? It's right near.
Yeah, so their current railroad crossing is right here, and it kind of runs down and through. So with this layout, this would essentially, in order to stay on their own property, allow them to make their way through the development. They own this little triangular piece here, and then gain access or crossing over on this westerly side. And I don't know if Mr. Sewell or Kelzer know what kind of equipment they're proposing there, but, I mean, that's how they access the property today, and they want to maintain that moving forward, since they still have agricultural land that they need to access.
To be honest, it's not going to impact me, it's going to impact whoever buys property there, so.
I have one, I didn't want to go this way, but I really have to share this. At least 14 of us have been unequivocally been promised that there will be no further development for many, many years. I know what I'm doing. I would have never bought in this beautiful neighborhood if I had known this was going to happen. We had assurances, verbal assurances, I believe, a law in the state of Minnesota. We don't want to go that far, but this is outrageous that there is a distance between the marketing group of a company and the executives and the directors. That's common. But whoever is the agent telling us that this will not happen have to be asked the same question now. I'm sorry. We bought on the wrong assumptions. I feel terrible. Thank you. Am I wrong about this? Absolutely not. Am I lying or exaggerating? No.
Brian, there's one more person on Zoom that has their hand raised.
Okay. I can't see, who is it?
Yeah, sorry, let me unshare my screen.
It's a Kim?
I'm not sure the name, but
just
whoever's
his
under BSI phone.
If you know that we're talking to you, go ahead and speak.
Well,
Give us
Michelle,
your name.
yeah, there we go, okay.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Beth Sanchez. I live on Sophia Drive. And I just wanted to know really quickly that I know a lot of people are talking about pushing the traffic to the north, but I will say that in the 2040 comprehensive plan, and nowhere else do I see a road going through a wetland area. I understand that it can be done, but when we purchased our house, we purchased it because it was a wetland area. It's platted that way. That's the way that the development was done when Sophia Drive was done. And if we had known that the city could change that or had the option to change that before we ever purchased the home, that backs up to a wetland. So I would just like to know that too, that I understand I'm probably in the minority here, but you are also affecting our property that we bought. To the south, we have trees that were taken down on the other side, to the south side of Sophia Drive. You're talking about affecting us to the west, you're talking about affecting us to the north as well. And like I said, I understand I'm probably in the minority, but we did buy our property, our house, on the notion that we had a wetland reserve to the north that we didn't believe could be touched. And everybody asked us to go back to the zoning plans, and I did, and it was platted, it is platted as wetland reserve all the way up to railroad tracks, and I also talked to somebody with the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Looks like we'll take this back again to the commissioners. Go ahead, Commissioner Seiler?
Yeah, just some comments and some feedback for the developers and I guess everybody in the audience since we have a big party here going on. First off, thank you for caring. Thank you for showing up, voicing your concerns. This is the first part of this process, as Liz kind of said earlier. So this is a concept. Concepts always change, they always improve, and this is the first step of making it better. Just comments on the Oak Creek development. I personally like 2 accesses in and out. It just seems to work better. There's been some talk tonight maybe of only having 1. Don't know exactly if that's the best plan to connect the neighborhoods and keep a community feel, but 1 or 2, I could go either way for Oak Creek on that. 107 homes, I think, is too many. So I'll just make a comment to the developer. I think 107 is too many. One way to possibly reduce some of the homes is when you come back to a preliminary plan and you have your park concept. Put the park concept where a few of the homes are. Don't put the park concept back by the creek or where the trees are. Let's work on keeping that the way it is and not taking trees down. And then to everybody that's expressed traffic concerns, you know, we don't obviously know what traffic's going to be like going forward. This may be the new normal. There's hybrid working, there's full-time working. There could be 2 trips or 20 trips per house. You know, we'll let the traffic, I'd like to see what the results are of the traffic survey, and then we can guide further if we need to reduce homes, increase access points, reduce access points. That's still to be determined, but one thing I do think that happens at meetings like this or situations like this is a good chance to improve a problem that already exists. I think even without the development, with what I've been hearing and what I've seen and what I've driven on those roads, it is that there's a lot of smaller homes. It's a tight, or smaller lots. It's a tight, compacted area to begin with. The new proposal here, 65-foot width lots, those are a lot bigger than most of the lots currently in the neighborhood. But regardless, if there's a traffic or a road or a safety problem, you can work with city staff. We're working on improving other areas and other streets in Chaska right now that had problems before a new development came in, kind of like your own. So I think this can be a win-win from that respect. We had a commenter on the wetland, what's going to happen to it. I think in the materials, it's contemplated right now to be a possible donation to the city. It's not finalized, but for the apartment piece of Clover Ridge Apartments, that wetland may be donated. More to come on that. Again, we're at concept. To the residents that spoke that live on Clover Preserve Court, I'd like to ensure there's more screening. Not every car that's coming out of the lot is going to have its lights on. Obviously, the ones at night are, and nights more in the winter than in the summer with the way we are with the rotated with the sun. But I think we can work to mitigate some of those, some of the lights coming out by introducing screening or working to get another type of berm or just something. I got to go personally see that again to recommend what's best, but again, we're in concept. We can work through this with the developer and the city to solve that problem or to mitigate some of those measures. And then lastly, I think for my comments, on Sophia Court, if the lots are going to remain as proposed, and that's no guarantee at concept, I would like to see those rolled into the Jonathan Association because I believe that Sophia Court currently is part of Jonathan. That'd just be my recommendation to the developer to really pursue that. And I'll yield to the rest of the commission.
All right. Commissioner Urbanski, go ahead.
Liz, is there any reason we will not have development to the west or the south someday of this proposed development?
Well, in terms of utility connections, it wouldn't be able to serve that area from where this development is coming from. The other piece is that the guidance for that area is mainly rural residential. So it's in our green belt area. So the density there is already at a lower caliber than what we see in the normal low residential single family. There could be cluster development within that because that guidance does allow for that. But larger, more dense developments like we see right now is not typically a part of that picture unless they go through a pretty extensive process with us, an amendment to our comp plan. But the way it's set up right now is for rural residential and only allows for a lower.
It could be rezoned too, right? There's something called rezoning.
Not before you change it.
Well, that's something that can be considered.
So when I look at this and I kind of envision it, and you know, if I could wave a magic wand and make it look right and make everybody happy in here, by the way, it would be to preserve those wetlands and that treed area. Once those are gone, they're gone forever. You don't get it back. And the way this development is laid out, and I understand you have to have X amount of homes to make a profit in order to do things, but we also want, once this land is developed, where it is the way it is for perpetuity, basically, at that point. It would be nice to have some ghost platting here to show, maybe it's an outlot that would at least allow for a road connection to the south and possibly to the west into the future. And if we have that, then maybe we could keep those two cul-de-sacs where they're at. I know we'd have to extend services through that wetland or through that treed area, but that's going to be rather minimal compared to what we're looking at here. And it would just be nice to, again, if you're drawing, if you've got an open notebook and you're able to design the thing the way you want it for everybody to fit and keep the integrity of what we're trying to do as a city here, trying to preserve that last little chunk of woods would be nice. So maybe it is just a north entrance at this time, which is gonna, not allow great traffic flow through the rest of the neighborhood. It's gonna be kind of convoluted, but with a potential future entrance or ingress egress from the south and or the west would allow for additional traffic to move, and then it would also hook up future neighborhoods if we ever had that. So the way this is designed right now, you're gonna have segregation between neighborhoods into the future here, if that were to develop. And usually when we're talking about development, it's more when than if. So that's my 2 cents here.
My points have all been covered by everyone, and obviously the main focus of everybody's being here tonight, the main focus is the traffic plan, which obviously is going to happen before preliminary. Liz or Kevin, can you explain who does the traffic study and maybe what that process is?
Sure.
So that everybody's aware?
Yes. When a developer does a traffic study, it's usually under their own consultant. And we work together both on a staff and developer side of things to really create the scope of work for it, to understand kind of the target areas that need to be evaluated. So it is a collaborative process, but it is a study that will be initiated and paid for by the developer with a consultant that they choose, typically.
And the results of the study are directly used in the development of the preliminary plan.
Right. Yep.
So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Keep in mind that this is the concept plan at this point, so. Anything else before we move on with motion for the concept?
Conduct their own traffic study at all? It's just reliant upon the developer and their conflict of interest and all that sort of?
I think she said they work with the city.
Work together to create
The
the
developer
scope of
pays
work.
for the traffic study, and they work with the city on the study, and then the staff, their job is to follow all of our codes, make sure that the results of the traffic study are worked into the preliminary plan.
I would ask that, I looked through the 2018 one that was done for Sagebrook 2, and Hunter Mark Road was not included. The access roads out to 212 were not included in that study. It had Clover Preserve Drive, that was it. And then it had reference to Clover Preserve Lane, which it said doesn't matter because it's an extension. Clover Preserve, the one on the other side, also same thing, it's just an extension. So I would ask that the whole impact of the traffic be outside, include the entire neighborhood, because you're gonna, from the north entrance, you're gonna route traffic down through the commons area there by the park and through those roundabouts over to the school and out Hunter Mark Road. And I did do Google Map search and said, okay, if I'm up at that entrance, which way is it gonna route me? It's gonna route me right down Hunter Mark Road or out to 212, it's gonna take me all the way through the neighborhood.
So a wider radius of study.
Yeah, just
mile and a half radius?
expand the study so that it covers where the traffic's really gonna go and not just the 1 or 2 streets that are directly abutting the development. I don't know what the city's policies are, but I would ask that that's taken into account.
Maybe we can bring it from 70,000 trips to 63,000. Wouldn't that be great? Our kids don't count cars. I'm trying to teach them.
Matt, did you want to talk, or is he just listening?
No, I can jump in, Mr.
Thank you. I was hoping you would.
Yeah, part of the guidance that staff has given on this in particular.
And Matt, first of all, will you explain your role to the crowd here?
Matt Clark, Chaska City Engineer. It's a great comment. We've given the same feedback to the developer. They really need to look at this holistically, draw a bigger box, particularly look at Cloverfield Drive, Schoolmaster, Clover Clover Preserve. So yes, that will be all a part of the overall study.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, that was very helpful.
Yep.
And everybody heard Matt, he's our city engineer, and his dog was providing input as well. Well, I guess you can see it up there, okay. So, thank you very much, Matt. All right, having heard everything we've heard tonight, and keeping in mind that we're at concept, I'd like to take a motion for the concept. Is there anything we need to add to the points that are not there now?
Well, I think in the staff recommendations, they had the traffic plan
Yeah.
and all of those.
Yeah, they're
items.
always, it is in there. I just want to make sure we've looked at, and I looked at it, and I think the points that are always covered in a concept are in here.
Maybe
So,
Liz could put it back up on the screen.
I think one thing that's important too is, as we look at this traffic plan, and just to add to the commission's, it will not be just directly related to the residential development. The guidance that we've given is really to look at this holistically that says, with the proposed apartment complex, as well as, things that we presented later, is that there is a separate apartment complex that really, the traffic analysis includes all of the proposed development. So, we too need a level of certainty that says, what are the impacts? And do we have future improvements that are needed throughout the system? So.
all right. All right, that being said, I guess I'll entertain a motion from one of us to move forward with the concept plan and the points attached.
I'll make that motion and then just want to.
And you want to read it out so that, just so they know. Not all the points, but.
Now I gotta find it here.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to recommend the city council approval of the concept plan for a 107 lot development on 52 acres of land in the orderly annexation Laketown area, Oak Creek, and a 162 unit apartment building on approximately 10 acres of land, Cloverfield Apartments, subject to the following 33 conditions, as well as all the input and comments that we heard this evening.
Yeah, and before we vote, there's a
Can
lot.
I get a second first?
I'll second.
Okay.
And then, I guess before we vote, just to close the loop and provide feedback, that there's a lot to still be determined. There's a lot to still be planned. I think we'll continue to move this plan forward in a way that's best for the community. We just got to know more knowns, and we work with the developers to come up with the best solution for the community.
I totally agree with that. Any more discussion before we take a vote? All right, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign, motion carries. Thank you, and developers, I would appreciate your improvements over the last concept, but please continue to work with the neighborhoods and obviously staff to make sure that we come back with a good preliminary. All right, next on tonight's agenda, let's see, 7C, recommend approval of the concept plan for Clover Ridge Apartment, AV Development LLC, PC number 2021-21. Liz, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'll just wait a little bit,
Yeah. Let's give everyone a
some
minute.
time to pull this up as well.
Commissioner Olson, you may join us again. Instead of hiding back there. Oh, I'm just kidding. Enjoy the cheap seats. No, it's part of the process. It was a good meeting.
That was a great turnout.
I'll get started. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. We have another concept plan application in front of us this evening, and it's actually a project that's very close to the last one. This one's Clover Ridge Apartments being proposed by AV Development. So the site they're looking at is highlighted in blue on this aerial exhibit. So it is located just north of the Twin Cities and Western Railroad. We have Clover Ridge Drive abutting it on its eastern edge. Pioneer Vista, which is the townhome development by Lennar on Emerson Court, is just northeast of the subject property. Then we have the Kelzer land just to the immediate west. The other apartment site we were looking at this evening is just to the south here, and then Oak Creek is kind of kitty corner on the southwest portion of the site. So in terms of how this fits into our comprehensive plan and land use provisions, the comp plan does guide this area to be high-density residential and open space. I've included an excerpt from our comp plan below and the site circled within that to show exactly where we're talking about and what it's guided for. So the proposal this evening is consistent with how it is guided in our comp plan. The site is currently zoned rural, so it will be rezoned as a part of the second phase in the process. In terms of existing conditions on the property, it's a total of 12 acres in size. However, 6 of those are kind of the developable area, as there is a wetland that currently encompasses a majority of the property. There are 2 existing stormwater ponds on the property, mostly on the northern side. These were put in when Clover Ridge Drive was extended to Pioneer Trail. So those are ponds that are necessary for the infrastructure out there, and they do plan to remain as this plan moves forward. And then the railroad tracks, like Mike Wagner pointed out, also abuts this property. So it will be important as it moves forward how buffering takes place and screening from that. So the current request this evening, again, is for concept plan approval for a 120-unit market rate apartment. They also did conduct a neighborhood meeting on December 2nd of this year and had about 2 people show up. So if you need more information around some of the conversation from that, the developer can share that, but it sounded like there wasn't much really discussed at that meeting, much more questions than anything. This is the overall site plan, and I've also included a rendering that the developer has done for the building that they propose out there. So this building is 120 units. They will be market rate apartment units. They also plan a 4-story tall building as well. Access will come directly from one access onto Clover Ridge Drive. In terms of parking, they're showing both surface parking and an option for underground parking too. They are under a threshold that doesn't meet our requirements for a multifamily type use. They're at about 1.6 parking stalls per unit. Our code requires 2 parking stalls per unit. So that'll be one thing that they'll have to work on as they prepare for their preliminary. It doesn't seem like it's unsolvable. There appears to be some opportunities there that they can explore to really bolster the parking. In terms of the overall style and amenities that they're proposing for this building, the style of the building is very much like the Lake Jonathan Flats building. And you can kind of see that in the rendering too, so it has some modern type elements and look to it. In terms of amenities, they did indicate an area, again, on the westerly side to kind of overlook the wetland area for a patio or other elements for pedestrians to be, to really take in kind of the natural amenities out there. But one thing that they'll have to provide more detail as we prepare for the preliminary is how that's programmed, what's the size of it, are there other opportunities for rooftop amenities with these unique sites and the natural amenities that occur there. So things to work on as they move forward. And much like what we discussed with the other apartment building, given kind of the high exposure of this building on all of its sides, 360-degree architecture would be important as they move forward. So that essentially means that all sides are really articulated evenly all the way through so that it provides a nice view from any angle. And then just reiterating with the railroad being there and the edge kind of on the south here abutting that, what can be done to really bolster that up so that mitigation can be achieved as much as possible. So might be a little redundant here, but the things that we really highlighted, you know, for pieces that they'll have to work on as they move towards the next step is getting that traffic study done. So like Matt Clark mentioned, that they are taking more of a holistic approach with kind of the sites that are in question this evening to really understand their impacts on the overall system out there. Working on the parking piece and getting it to our parking code, working on the amenities and detailing those out in terms of how those are provided on site so that they meet our usable open space requirements. Also work on the railroad buffer, what happens on that southern edge, and then working on the overall design in terms of providing a building that provides their own individuality, but also showing something that can fit into the community has always been an important comment that we'd like to give to any developer. So with that, we are asking you to make a motion this evening to recommend approval of the concept plan for Clover Ridge Apartments, and then based on the conditions that are listed in the staff report. The developer is here if you have questions for them. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, any questions for Liz or the developer before we open it up to comments?
Initially, is there an idea of where to try to find more parking stalls or how to do that?
Commissioners, thank you very much, and thanks for your service to the community. You know, all the comments people made today resonates with me on both sides of the aisle, you know, being able to see that. You know, this is a beautiful site. It has a lot of wetlands. We want to preserve.
I'm sorry, could you tell us your name?
Oh, sure.
And who you represent?
Yeah, my name is Ashish Agarwal. I am one of the partners with AV Development. My address is 16135 55th Avenue, Plymouth. Like I said, I'm the partner with AV Developments. And one of the things we kept in mind is to preserve as much of the green area as we can, because it's such a beautiful site with a lot of wetlands at the back. And a lot of cities have 1-to-1 requirements for a 1-bedroom and 1.5 to 2 requirements for a 2-bedroom. So we thought that 1.6 was still a little bit on the higher side, what you see in the marketplace and what other developments require. We do understand that Chaska has 2-to-1 requirement, 2 parking spots to 1. If the Planning Commission or the City Council really feels that we need more parking, like Liz said, we would certainly work to find more parking, but our intention was to preserve as much of the green space and the wetlands as possible.
Yeah, and I can quickly address that too. We don't want all the parking to be installed per our code. Usually what we like to see is proof of parking that does meet our code, but it doesn't necessarily have to be installed. So if there is, you know, desire to maintain green space and if parking is needed in the future, that there is ability to do that. But we also encourage to try to preserve as much green space as possible if the parking is not needed.
Yeah, thanks. I kind of see both sides of that, where I didn't necessarily want to see more pavement and more lines on the next submittal, but I wanted to know, and I know it's a really nice spot in terms of the scenery and everything, but then again, from a resident side, and you know more about the market and who's probably going to buy, buy or rent your apartments, but they're probably all going to have vehicles because there's not a ton of mass transit right there on that street. So there's two sides, so. Okay.
Go ahead.
Any thought, is there an affordable housing or any thoughts on that for this project?
Commissioner, none at all. I will be very frank, where the cost of construction is going right now, making apartment buildings even work, you read in news all the time how housing has become so unaffordable, right? Just making affordable parking, affordable units in a community like this, it becomes economically unfeasible for us. I always say that the best way to solve the housing crisis is always encourage more housing, because that's the only way we can get over this problem. Making affordable housing in properties like these basically shelves the project. We have seen that in Minneapolis, we are seeing that in St. Paul, all across the board, that these projects are also so tight. Everyone thinks that the builder is making so much money. I can tell you that these are very, very tight projects.
It might be a kind of a two-pronged one, but I know that there's currently a few short trails that go off into the wetland areas on that land. It'd be good to understand what opportunities, when it comes to preliminary, to be able to extend and be able to really get into that wetland area that's only been touched a little bit with trails. The other one, and the other one is more to staff, is the question of what amenities, because this is, we're talking about this apartment, and then obviously the one on the south side of the railroad tracks. What kind of impact, or on the city side of things, for park amenities that both this development as well as the one on the south will have on the current Jonathan Park that is just the east of the south and east of this development? So understanding what the plans are for the park or recreation areas that both this apartment as well as the one to the south are going to have on the neighborhood. So what are the requirements that come with this kind of development?
Yeah, and I think it's always good to start to understand kind of the demographic that the units are going to be catering to really understand what type of amenities would be more suitable for the people living in those units. So I think much like what we dealt with on Pioneer Vista, is we did understand there was going to be a level of children living in that community. So preparing for a tot lot to help cater to that demographic, I think was appropriate. So we probably need more information around, the type of demographic that they're really suiting this apartment building for, to understand kind of what the amenities really should and could be there, so that, those areas can be self-sustainable in terms of what they offer their residents.
And then, I was going to say, and then kind of on the tail end of that one is this still in play with Jonathan, meaning part of the association or not?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask too.
Yeah, it technically isn't, because it's north of the train tracks. But is there still a discussion that could be had around that? Sure.
Right.
But as far as we're concerned, it's not within.
And I knew that there was the delineation as to, where it may fall within, the balance of that. But yet again, it's a matter of having the conversations with Jonathan, understanding the impact that it's going to have on the neighborhoods that are close by.
Go ahead, Commissioner Urbanski.
A question for Liz. Kevin, so we've got two concept plans in front of us, both requiring traffic studies. Would they be done independently, or would they both look at each other and say, okay, we've got
They're all done together.
Yeah, they're going to look at it
Perfect.
together, yeah.
Hi, Mike Benson again. So I represent Chaska Investment. We are the fee owner of the land, and we've been working with Ashish and Vishal on this project. As a backdrop, 2017, I engaged Westwood to update the tree survey, wetland delineation, et cetera. And so they also developed the concept within the city's guidance for in the 2040 comp plan for this high-density project. With respect to the apartment building itself, both this site and to the south, and the demographic that they'll be serving, I engaged Maxfield Research to do a study, analyze the apartment market within the Chaska community. The short story or the short conclusion is Chaska can support about 150, I think it was about 150 units in the next 12 to 18 months. So there's a definite need and there's a definite market. And the market specifically would be millennials and empty nesters. So I think that answers somebody's question.
Would that report be published to staff and shared with us? And I'm asking because, and now I'll just go with it, it's always easy to be able to say, well, it's the two ends of the spectrum that aren't going to require me the developer, to invest more capital into something that may be needed. So I guess I would say if there's a study, then it should be shared with staff as well as commissions as well too.
Yep, we can request that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other comments on this? Okay. Oh, now my iPad is playing some games here.
That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Give us your name and address, please.
Steve Kelzer, 2025 Pioneer Trail. The humble farm owner to the west. I just want to make a comment that we, over the years, we've been trespassed a lot on our property, especially Sagewood, Sophia, all those, and not just a little, but quite a bit. And with this development here, if you're thinking of making a path close to our property, I think we don't want to have people jumping off. And so what I would like to see maybe is signage or fencing or something, but I just wanted to be aware that there is a problem trying to maintain our life out there and being constantly overrun. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. All right, anything else? Otherwise, I think being that this is a concept with points attached, I'd entertain a motion to move forward on this one.
Yeah, Brian, I'll make a motion to recommend a city council approval of the Clover Ridge Apartment Concept Plan for 120 units on 6 acres of land, subject to the following 21 conditions attached in the materials.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Lacey. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, have a good night.
And 7D, next on the agenda, recommend approval of the concept plan for Chaska Creek Industrial Phase 3. Oppidan PC number 2021-19. Liz, it's all yours.
Thank you. Just going to pull up my screen again here. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. Here's another concept plan in front of you. This is being known as the Chaska Creek Industrial Phase 3, being proposed by Oppidan. So here's an aerial site exhibit just highlighting the parcel of property that we're discussing this evening. So the property is located south of Creek Road, south of Chaska Creek Boulevard. The Chaska Creek Business Park is basically where I'm highlighting my cursor right now. It's in the southwest quadrant of Highway 212 and Angler Boulevard. So this is merely just south of that development. You have Wetzel Lane, which is a private road that accesses 5 single-family homes just to the west there. Then we have the Razor property just to the south, and additional properties, agricultural properties to the south as well. There's a pretty significant ravine system that bifurcates the site on kind of the southeast portion, south portion of the site, as well as some wooded areas too. But really the area we're going to be looking at this evening for kind of the proposal really occurs on the agricultural open area of the property. So just in terms of previous approvals, it was back in October of 2013 that the concept plan for Chaska Creek Business Park was approved. That was for the 87-acre site that I highlighted earlier. Within that concept plan, there were a couple industrial sites planned within that, which we now know as Chaska Creek Industrial Phases 1 and 2. And then it was in March of 2021 that the final site and building plans were approved for both of those industrial buildings north of Creek Road. So one at 133,000 square feet and another at 168,000 square feet. I bring those up because the developer who proposed those buildings is the same that's being proposed this evening, and it's essentially a very similar project to what was proposed on the north side. Even though it's not technically in the Chaska Creek Business Park, it, in some respect, has connection to that. The developer did conduct a neighborhood meeting on November 22nd. They did have several people come to that meeting who did express both questions and concerns around the topics of lighting, screening, height of the building, utilities, future development, hours of operation, and an overall construction timeline. In terms of how the comp plan guides this area, I've taken an excerpt out of our comp plan or our land use plan and highlighted where this site is in particular, but it guides it to be business park, which is the purple color, and the proposal is consistent with this. The current zoning out there is rural residential and open zoning districts, so they will be, or they will need to be rezoned as a part of the process. So in terms of existing conditions, the overall property is 38 acres in size. They're only looking at about 13 acres of the actual area to develop. So again, that's mainly kind of what's shown as the agricultural area on this site exhibit. This is a better picture kind of showing the ravine and wooded areas of the site, and then they did delineate one wetland on site here. So the request that we have this evening is for concept plan approval. They are proposing an industrial office building of 177,000 square feet. They do not have an end user identified, so this is set up much like the other two buildings where when those were approved, they were spec buildings, no end users. They like to, or like the approach of being able to get the approvals, build the building, and then market it appropriately to end users. So it's worth noting that much like the other two buildings to the north, this building is not designed to be a distribution center, which tends to be a question around these size of buildings. Rather, they slate these more so for flex users who specialize in manufacturing, warehousing, science and medical type uses. So they anticipate the same for this building. Here I have the proposed site plan, kind of fit in with the overall development of the Chaska Creek Business Park, just to give you kind of that full picture. But really, we're looking at kind of the bolded out outline here, that's south of Creek Road, east of Wetzel Lane, and then ultimately will be west of Chaska Creek Boulevard that extends to the south here. The building they're proposing, again, is the same as the north and south buildings, a little bit larger square footage, but the height is the same as those two buildings. They are showing 2 access points into the overall site. One that would come directly off of Creek Road and line up with the site just north of theirs. And then the other one would come from a driveway extension off of the roundabout that's proposed at Creek Road and Chaska Creek Boulevard. Our overall plans or long-range plans show this collector road to basically extend all the way through southerly. However, that extension is really going to be development-driven. The extension of that is not proposed or triggered with this building. It would really be triggered by what happens to the south of this site on a pretty large scale in order for that to punch all the way through. So in the interim, the site would use kind of a driveway access that would kind of come off of the system there to provide truck access into the building and site. In terms of parking, so they're showing parking pretty much on all sides of the building with the exception of maybe the south side. And depending on kind of the overall makeup of the building, in terms of office versus warehousing, would kind of dictate how much parking they're going to need. One thing of note is with any warehouse portion of a building, we do require that site plan show a 1 parking stall per 350 square foot requirement if that warehousing were to change to manufacturing, which triggers a larger parking requirement because it tends to come with more jobs. So we, like the north buildings, would like to see a site plan that shows that. Again, it doesn't have to be constructed that way. It can be shown as proof of parking, but just to show that the site can sustain that type of use. I've included kind of the conceptual drawings of the building, but again, this building is designed very much in line with the buildings to the north. So it will kind of have that cohesive effect throughout all 3 buildings. They'll do the diamond metal paneling out there with some concrete panels, windows, and some accent materials as well. With this site being adjacent to residential on Wetzel Lane, the screening that happens along the west edge of the site as well as the south will be really important as we move forward in terms of what's being seen, with the loading dock oriented to the south there, being able to provide berming and landscaping to help with the sight lines that happen there. And in addition to that, try to understand the lighting and limit the lighting in certain ways to really try to address this edge appropriately. Here's a more zoomed in look if we need to refer to it, but more of a simplified drawing, just showing the layout of the building and the parking and kind of where it's being accessed. So some things to work on for preliminary would be the lighting plan. Obviously, we don't have those details right now as we're at concept, but it will be important to understand the lighting that's proposed, and then screening as it relates to kind of those more sensitive edges on the west side and the south side, and how it would be able to help screen the loading dock area, but also the parking lots adjacent. And then working on the parking plan to show a plan that meets parking code moving forward. So in conclusion, we're asking you to make a motion this evening to recommend approval of the concept plan for Chaska Creek Industrial Phase 3, and then based on the conditions that are listed in the staff report. I know the applicant and developer are in the audience, so they're here to answer questions, and I am as well.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. Commissioners, any questions for Liz? Or the developer?
Yeah, I guess Creek Road still, as you go south towards downtown, the plan for that is to stop at some point just after what would be probably the Savannah roundabout, right? So there's
Correct.
no
It would
changes
stub
with.
off, yep.
Yeah, stub off.
It's like a cartway or?
Yeah, so, okay. so
Just
that-
to service the people that live there?
Yeah, right.
And then
yep.
the roundabout that's right next to the site that you described is initially going to be a driveway. Are like, you know, the dimensions and the specs of that known yet, or is that going to be later at a prelim?
Well, the roundabout will be going in.
Well, it's going in right now, I
Yes.
think, yeah.
So we already understand kind of the impact of that or dimensions of that. And they're also slating right-of-way appropriate for the size of the collector road to extend through.
So
we
the
know-
driveway will just be really what the actual road will be. It's not going to be a thinner piece of pavement.
I think that's still up for discussion. Obviously, we'll get more details in the preliminary, but kind of understand what that dimension needs to be moving forward. I don't think it's quite determined at this time. But
Okay.
I don't think we're slating it to be the full roadway either.
But the south exit out of the roundabout has already been set as into where, platted where it's going to be.
Correct,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. Do the developers have anything they want to, info that you guys want to give us on the concept plan?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jay Moore with Oppidan Investment Company. I think Liz did a really good job laying it out. You know, this is the third building of industrial park that we see some logic in continuing on. We've had a lot of early success with businesses that want to relocate from other communities into Chaska, so we think that's exciting from a job perspective and tax base. And so just want to reiterate that we did have a neighborhood meeting. I know Rob's here and a couple others I see in the crowd that might have some comments to this, but you know, we are going to try to work with the neighborhood and the city to have as least impact as possible on those existing homes. And so we'll meet all the setbacks, and we do have Brady here from Samatech, who's a civil engineer, that if you guys have technical questions, he can kind of talk about what we're going to try to do to mitigate, especially with the loading dock area. So if you have any questions on that, I welcome you to ask him up. But if you have any other questions, I'm here to answer. But
I read through the neighborhood meeting thing. That's always important to read through that. And it looked like the answers you guys gave were the, you know, typical what I think should happen in an industrial setting like that. So was there any negative feedback to your answers?
is that a question to me?
Yeah, or whoever was at the meeting from your group.
I'm not the developer, but I have feedback. I'm from the neighborhood.
All right, we'll see if we have any more questions for the developer.
None at this time from me.
Okay.
Well, let's
go
hear
ahead,
from the
Eddie.
neighbor.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Yep, come on up.
So if there's somebody that can talk more to the screening, I would love to hear more about what the proposed screening is and how that will work. I'm Robert Panning, Bob Panning, 11315 Wetzel Lane. neighborhood right next to the property. First of all, it's less for the development of this actual building, but the zoning. So I bought the property 26 years ago, right in the middle of the green belt. We had an earlier discussion about the green belt, and the city's own comprehensive plan calls it a permanent land use protection tool. Well, it's not permanent because it moved. It went from my property to west of my property, and now I am zoned industrial business park. My property in your plan shows me industrial. I have lots of questions about what is the future of my property, aside from what's happening right next to me. In the earlier discussion for the other neighborhood, they talked about developing west and how that couldn't happen currently because that would encroach in the green zone. Well, what's the green zone? There's nothing permanent about it. It just changes. This property that we're talking about, the zoning on that, if it goes to business, will have changed 4 times since I bought. First, it was light residential, then it was medium residential, then it was educational because a school wanted to come in and said, hey, we'd like to build there, so the city changed it to educational, and now it's going to business. And now my property is business. So I'm wondering, what is the plan? I'm here at the Planning Commission asking, what is the plan for our neighborhood? My specific comments about this property is what they talked about, the screening. There's talk of a small berm and some trees. Depending on the trees, I won't live long enough for those trees to do any good. It has to be a sizable berm that blocks the light and sound. And I understand that may take moving the building slightly. The normal city setbacks will not allow for the size berm that is required to do that. So it's a big property. It may, I don't know the specifics. That's what I'd like to hear more about, the sound abatement and lighting. So those are my main concerns. As far as that individual property, minimizing it as much as possible, sound and light, traffic, all of those things. But then going forward, I'm here to ask, if we're changing zoning, if you look at the plan now, the green zone is out west and I am industrial. Simple things come to mind for me. If I'm planning to reside my house, should I go do that? Or are you going to come in and take my property away in 5 years? What would I do anything with my property if I am now zoned industrial and the plan is to put a building up on my property? What is the plan? That's what I'm asking the commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
And I can help answer that.
Thanks, Liz.
I mean, with the current comp plan right now, it's our 2040 comp plan. And I might need a little history in terms of when it changed, but our 2040 guides that area to be business park. I think it was back in, was it a part of the Southwest plan? Part of the Southwest plan that we did, we planned for it around the 2012 timeframe is when that area was really looked at for how it was going to be long-term. So that's when it changed, I believe, from Greenbelt to Business Park. So it dates back to 2012 that change occurred. But now, the way that the current comp plan guides it to be is Business Park in most of that area.
So what does that mean to the current residents that live there?
When they're ready to develop, then that would be the guidance for those parcels. But that would be certainly up for the property owners when they're ready for development. Yep, go ahead.
So literally, right across from me, there's an open field again. So even if they don't approach me, can they approach that landowner and put up a building right in front of my driveway? Is that the plan?
It's guided that way for Business Park.
And what does that do to my property value? My neighbors. I mean, it's a nice neighborhood. It's been there a long time. Woods in the back, the creek's in the back. That was the appeal when we bought it and invested in it. And developed it, and it's all nice housing, and, you know, it's a prideful neighborhood, I'll call it, or whatever. And yes, I'm looking out for myself. What's that do to my property value? When concrete, does buildings go up literally just within feet of my property? What's the plan? How is this a plan? I don't understand.
Well, Bob, I think right now, all you can go by is, you know what the zoning is right now in the area. What's happening going forward, if no one's put that land up for sale or bought it, I don't know what to tell you. Nobody knows what to tell you.
How does that go?
It does open a bigger question, and we've kind of touched on it with a few of the developments that have come, as well as, you know, going back to, you know, Sagewood and whatnot. It's what is the bigger picture, what is the plan, and things have changed over the last 20 years, specifically on the west side of Chaska, on what is the future. And you're stuck in the mix because you're the residents that have been there, and things have changed around you, and you're still on an island, which is a nice island, but unfortunately, what's going on around and how the comp plan has adjusted opens the door. Doesn't mean anybody's going to walk in, but the door's open. And, you know, obviously with this parcel, somebody's walking in that door, and we're having to address it. But by them walking through that door forces the planning commission as well as the city to really understand what is it that we're going to do when that next person walks in the door, or that next land comes up to be filled. And we need to understand that, because the comp plan is, I'll say pie in the sky, but it's as you've seen, it's ever changing. But when it comes to the development, we got to talk about the here and now and what is more reality that's going to happen. So I agree, there needs to be more understanding of what is to come and how are we going to handle that from a planning side of things for the rest of this. It's not even zoned, it's just designated within the comp plan as business. And what does that mean when we actually start taking action? And for those people that are not necessarily matching that designation, how do we handle it? Because they're going to be drastically impacted as things change around them. And berming and trees aren't always the answer. So I suggest we really look at all the impacts with this plan. It's not just filling a space and adding to the tax base. It's what's the impact to those people that are living around it.
You know, this is the first step of many, and the next one is with an elected body as the city council, so you also have a city council rep. I mean, if you're really concerned, and I think you are, and you maybe should be, that you reach out to your city council rep and have a voice in there at the next meeting with, you know, elected officials. And we will certainly try to appease everybody on the development and the residential side as we can as a planning commission. But also for some things, you know, our hands are a little tied. It's not that we dictate and we can make anything happen.
What is your body that recommends to the council?
Mm-hmm.
What will the recommendation be?
Well, I add a concept plan. I think pretty much all the time, if it's within legal right, we kind of have to recommend it. You know, that landowner has the right to sell. You have the right to sell. Anyone has the right to sell their property.
Within the zoning that is there,
Mm-hmm.
which requires a change in zoning.
And that'll be part of the next step of a process if it moves forward.
And there'll be a public hearing on that.
A public hearing, yep.
I just don't hold out hope that 6 homeowners are going to change that, and there will be no real plan in place to do it. That's my fear. But we're going to vote tonight to approve the preliminary plan.
No,
Concept.
Go forward.
Concept plan.
The concept plan, sorry.
Yep, that's all right.
Terminology.
Well, there's a big difference between the two.
I get that. I'm not trying to minimize that. But talking with the developer, there's a They have a date in mind. 18 months from now, they want to open that building to customers. That's their plan. There's a lot that has to happen in 18 months. And tonight, it's all going to start tonight with an approval here, going to the city council, and it's just going to get the ball going. And I'm wasting my breath, that's what I feel.
I wouldn't say you're wasting your breath. The developers are behind you, we're up in front of you. They're listening to you, we're listening to you. As Commissioner Saylor was saying, we're a little bit handcuffed on what we can do. We have to follow kind of what the law lays out for us. But everybody's paying attention to what you're saying. And if you don't come to these meetings, nobody hears it. At least you're making, people have to make decisions now. Some of them aren't comfortable, but they get at least discussed that way.
And the developer does have to follow the law, they do have to follow the codes, and they do have to work with staff, and us and the city council to, get a preliminary and a final plan approved, so.
And again, my bigger question is not even just this property, but beyond. My property right to the north of me, the property to the south of me, I'm surrounded by it.
Well, that's tough to answer because we, I'm not, and we're not in the business right now of going and buying that property and developing it. It depends on what the landowners decide to do with it as the first step. And, the comprehensive plan guides what it can be. And to your unique situation, I guess your house, unfortunately, or property has changed in its guidance over the last 20, 30 years from what it was when you bought it.
Highway 212 was a good thing for a lot and not such a good thing for a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that when we bought the property, that it was there. All we could go by what was the plan in place. We were Chaska Township, it was going to be annexed. All that was in place. We knew that when we signed the papers. But this zoning was not.
Yeah, this is a difference from the 2020 comp plan to the 2040. So. I would recommend, Bob, that you be involved in, or keep a close eye on what happens between now and preliminary. Talk to your city council rep too and make sure they know how you feel and specific requests that you'd like to see in the preliminary, with lighting and berms and that type of thing, if there's any signage issues, that type of thing. That's really all we can recommend to you, so.
Brian, Liz, do you have anything else to add to our discussion?
No, I think,
I meant Kevin, sorry.
I don't, yeah.
I think that, you kind of nailed it on the head that discussions need to continue.
Yeah. It's like every concept of preliminary we go through, so.
Can I speak for 1 second? I got a quick
Sure.
question on this project as well. Christy Haskins-Schuler, 9478 County Road 43 in Chaska. Just wondering what the city's plan is for the Crick Road and future utilities along where the roundabout is to Wetzel Road. County Road 10's kind of busted up with heavier traffic. Just wondering what their plan is for that infrastructure right through that area.
So as I understand it, there's a roundabout going in right adjacent to the property that we're discussing now. Creek Road's going to continue on to the southeast, if I have my directions right, go underneath 212 and eventually meet up with Savannah, which is on the southwest side of 212 that's going to be extended.
I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen in between the Crick Road between the two buildings, between going from the roundabout west to Wetzel Road. That section all through there kind of benefits that developer.
You're talking about the
both of
condition
them
of the
parts.
road and, or the infrastructure of the
The
road?
condition, there's access points coming in the middle of that building and the Crick Road right there. Wondering what the plan is
for that section and then future development to happen down along Crick Road, more toward County Road 10.
Because Crick Road's a very thin two-lane
Yeah.
county
Yeah,
road, and now
and
you're
it's-
having two industrial buildings accessing it. So what is it, are they widening as well too?
Well, it has to get rebuilt in that section right there.
Right.
Yes.
Is the plan for the developer to take care of that, or is that going to be an
That is, the two developments in the city are going to be working on that stretch of road.
Okay, as well as public utilities brought all the way to Wetzel, or?
No, no,
Okay.
not at this time. We need to understand kind of what's happening out there, because we have multiple ways to bring infrastructure out there. And so we need to have a clearer understanding of where to go with the infrastructure in this area before we make solid commitments on where we're going to put that sewer up into this area, because we have to have a better understanding of what's going to happen to the west, what's going to happen with their properties. Is it going to be residential, which has a much different sewer capacity need than an industrial building on that site? And so having some clarity on that, we're going to probably stop the infrastructure as short as we can, so, because we don't know what's happening to the west. If we had more clarity and we knew we needed a big pipe, a small pipe, whatever size pipe, we could make more of those decisions. We have multiple ways to get to the west, whether it's to Wetzel or to the northwest of this area, all the way kind of out to the Glocks and beyond along Creek Road. At this point, we know what we have in front of us here, but we don't understand yet in enough detail to really start making large infrastructure decisions west of here. We have to have a better handle on that before we start putting really expensive pipe in the ground. And so,
I just ask that the city maybe kind of plan ahead, so it's not going to fall into the hands of a few property owners when this building is benefiting from a large access point into that. And there's a couple different ways you can bring the public utility lines. I just ask that the city probably plan ahead for Glock's property and the other properties that are
we know
heading
how to
in that
get there.
direction.
We just need to know how big a pipe we need to bring to them in that area, and trying to figure that out. As a municipality, one of the things we always struggle with, whether it's Chaska or any other city, is how far in front of ourselves do we get with infrastructure, because it's a major investment, and if things change, the markets change, we need to make sure that we're not overbuilding our infrastructure, because that, in the last Great Recession, caused considerable damage to a lot of municipalities' finances when they had overextended infrastructure, and then things didn't happen, and then there was no way to pay for it. So we try and be very cautious about how we approach. We know we can get sewer and water up there in multiple directions, and we're keeping our options open, but we also need to understand what's happening to the west there, and where we're going with ultimate land use, and when that's happening, and what's happening in that area before we start making investments. And so as you can see from this entire area, a lot of these investments are made just in time with the development that's happening. I mean, we've known about this roundabout for a while, but we're just getting to it. We didn't go out when they built the first medical office building up at Clover Ridge Drive and Angler and build all this infrastructure out here. We waited for it to happen, so we understood exactly what we needed to do, and then we were able to put that infrastructure in at a size that met the needs, and that was being able to provide not just the development needs, but also the larger neighborhoods needs in those areas.
So how does discussion work with the property owners going along the Creek Road to County Road 10 and like Glocks and like Hanks? How does that all come together in a meeting? Because I'm just I kind of hope that the city would plan for the future so that the infrastructure is in a sense there and easier to be accessed versus rebusting up roads or huge assessments amongst property owners that could have maybe have been.
Creek Road is only one option for getting the sewer up into that area. We have multiple ways to get the sewer over there. Creek Road is only one of those options. We can go along the south side, we can go north of both of their buildings with infrastructure. We have multiple ways to get infrastructure out there.
So my understanding right now, so the medical building that went in, infrastructure goes north of Clover Ridge.
Correct.
These buildings essentially have no infrastructure. There's a pipe in the ground that acts as a holding tank, and the city's gonna pump it out. That is the plan.
No, that's the short-term plan. We're building, and we have a contract to build up Creek Road with the sewer, and we're in the process of building that. While they're building their building, there's probably very little flow going into that pipe that we have built. And so we will be there when there's demand with sewer coming up the Creek Road. We built it this summer, and we'll be building it next summer, and getting it up from right now, the sewer's down by Fireman's Park, and we'll be building it up all the way next.
How far all the way, I'm sorry?
We're going
All the way
right to
to
the
Wetzel?
roundabout.
What happens from the roundabout to Wetzel's? I mean, that's where my confusion comes into play,
We've
because
got
if it's
multiple
running.
ways to get the sewer
Oh, gotcha.
to the
Okay.
west.
Okay, I just asked what the city
And I understand
think about.
some property owners would love the sewer to be out there because it helps their property. I have no need for sewer to be out there, and I don't want to be assessed for it. I mean, that doesn't help me in any way.
And that's where I'm trying
And again, where
to,
it comes to the plan, it helps some, doesn't help others, I get that, but what is the plan?
and that's where I'm looking at a lot of developers, because the buildings being put into place, a lot of that infrastructure should be at the expense of them, because they're the ones who are benefiting from it. From the Wetzel forward should be those property owners, and I guess that's kind of where I'm asking the city for what their thoughts are and all of that.
It's really a good conversation, probably for you to have with Matt Clark, the city engineer, to figure out the exact details. At this point, with the concept plan, we're not there.
Okay.
And so,
Perfect, I was just wondering what the city's thoughts are.
I
Thanks.
was just gonna say, Kevin, I think we should welcome that conversation between both planning and engineering. I mean, like you said, the sewer is available that would serve future zoned areas that are to the west. It's just a question of no different with any commercial, residential property, is the timing of making sure that it is available, which it is, and the cost. And, right now with the project that we have, we worked with Cal Aspen, Robert, and some of the other folks, the making sure that we didn't preclude the opportunities for development to happen. It's probably just a question of clarity as to how that works and where is the availability with the things that are happening with all of the trucks and all of the activities that have been going on out there, that we should sit down and just go over.
Great plan.
You bet.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Glad you're here. Thank you, Chrissy.
Sorry, also along with traffic, what is the plan for the intersection of Creek Road and Engler?
Creek Road and Engler, the long-term plan with the county, with the access would be somewhat restricted in the future. They just completed a comprehensive overview of Engler, but there would be changes to the access, which is essentially why Creek Road and the roundabout and the upgrades need to be more self-serving. But yes, in the future, would you say, Kevin, the best way explanation is more of a Michigan J type three-quarter access? It still remains open, but because of the safety and where the intersection spacings are along the county highway, that access does get a little more closed off to create some more safe, better safe intersection.
It is a dangerous intersection currently, and with business park going in there and more traffic, it'll just get worse.
Yep, I think that's part of the study. We did work very hard with that. We looked at that pretty uniquely, specifically because of the zoning that is there, and making sure that the roundabout was sized, what is, really the traffic demand from what it is today goes down, could go down considerably along that section. So not, to Kevin's point, really not overbuilding what we need, and making sure that we're being thorough and consistent and conscious, right, as to the timing of when these upgrades happen and when the road upgrades occur.
Okay, thanks, Matt. All right. Any further discussion on the concept plan? If not, take a motion to approve the concept with the points added.
I'll make a motion to recommend the city council approve the concept plan for Chaska Creek Industrial Phase 3, subject to the following 21 conditions.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the comments. Can we take 5 before the last,
That's fine.
last piece?
Yep.
All right. So, we'll take 5. Gotta go to the bathroom. Seven E, recommend approval of the concept plan for West Creek Apartments, Community Asset Development Group, PC number 2021-11. Liz, if you please.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. I'm going to do one last screen share here. So we have another concept plan application in front of us for the project known as West Creek Apartments. This was formerly known as Hickory Street Apartments when it first came through. This project is being proposed by Community Asset Development Group. So the property is highlighted below in blue. There is a city-owned parcel of property that abuts the subject property on the west side that is also being looked at to be acquired into the parcel to kind of make the project happen here. That was also looked at in previous approvals too. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but this project does date back to 2017 when it was first brought in front of the city council in terms of what the kind of hopes of what they wanted to do on this site, looking for approval from the city or support from the city on the type of project that they were proposing. So kind of through 2017 and into 2019, the city council worked on kind of a letter of support for the project. It wasn't until May of 2019 that the project did get that full support that they needed. And that's when they came back, or they came forward with a concept plan for their project through the planning process. At that time, in May of 2019, they did propose a plan that showed two different buildings, two different apartment buildings. One would be market rate and one would be the apartment that supports young adults coming out of homelessness. During that time, they also showed the inclusion of the 1 acre, approximately 1 acre parcel of city land to be sold for the development to occur, and that was approved. So the concept plan plus looking at the potential of acquiring city land was all kind of wrapped into one. At that time, our comprehensive plan guided this site to be different. It did guide it to be office, so there was always a caveat that the comp plan would need to be updated during the 2040 update to show a guided use that would fit the guidance, or that would fit the what the use of the site was for. During the 2019 approvals, there was support for that change in the comp plan to occur. So August of 2020 is when we adopted our 2040 plan, and that's when the change occurred on this site to be downtown mixed use, which would support what they're proposing this evening from a guidance perspective. So wanted to show the May 2019 concept plan, so if we need to refer to it from a comparison standpoint, we can. But this is the one that showed the layout of two separate buildings. The market rate building was oriented towards Hickory Street, and then the supportive housing building was oriented to the rear there. And then just showing kind of how that compared to the or fit into where the city-owned parcel is in relation to all of that. So there was parking kind of in between the buildings. The access point was shown kind of on the more south easterly portion of the site to line up with the bus barn. So some major changes have occurred since the May 2019 approvals, which kind of triggered the need for this project to come back to concept plan approval process, which was more of a city council recommendation as well. But the bigger changes that occurred on this site is that the market rate apartment building has been completely eliminated from the project. The 16-unit supportive housing project has changed to 19 units. And then another big change is that they are now providing a 24/7 on-site staff person to be within the building, so that there's 24/7 monitoring associated with the use of the building.
That wasn't on the prior plan then?
Correct.
No.
Yep, they didn't have someone on-site available. So the current request this evening is concept plan approval for a 19-unit apartment building that provides support to young adults coming out of homelessness. The comp plan, like I iterated before, guides the site to be downtown mixed use, so the proposal is consistent with that. To get into the supportive housing piece and kind of what it's meant to do, and a lot of this probably can be best iterated from the applicant too if there's any questions, but it's really meant to cater towards the younger adult demographic who are coming out of homelessness. So young adults from ages 18 to 29 is who it's targeted for within the homeless category of Carver County. So Launch Ministries would partner with Community Asset Foundation and basically be the management or the counseling services of the overall program. So they would offer all of the counseling services to the people who occupy this building. It will be a requirement for the people who occupy this building to be a part of those counseling services so that they can get the proper help to help them through getting out of homelessness. So there are a couple pieces of criteria kind of related to that, to the people that would be able to occupy this building. So again, 18 to 29 years old, currently homeless and recommended by Launch Ministries for this building. They have to be employed. They also have to be a previous resident or employed within Carver County or attended school in the county. And they would have to continue to participate in the launch case management and other required programs, as I noted before. And then they must maintain employment to actively stay there. Getting to some of the conditions of the property that we're looking at. So the overall site acreage that they're looking at is roughly 2.5 acres total, which would include the approximate 1 acre piece of land owned by the city that's adjacent to it. Currently, there's a single-family home and detached garage on the site, so both of those will be demolished if this project moves forward. There's a scattering of trees, mainly oriented to kind of the south portion of the site and along kind of the railway or old railway edge. There's 2 significant storm sewer pipes that run through the property. There's one kind of on the north side that runs into the flood channel, and then one that kind of runs along the south side and also runs into the channel. So working around those was kind of one of the reasons for some of the bigger site planning changes that are occurring. Along with that, the flood channel is jurisdicted by the Army Corps of Engineers. There are regulations around proximity to this flood channel in terms of development and earthwork and so forth. So since our May 2019 approval date, the developer has been working, well, since we kind of ramped up the concept plan discussion again, the developer has been working with the Army Corps of Engineers on understanding kind of the regulations around that area, and they were finally able to give some clarification on what is allowed and what isn't. So the plan this evening also reflects meeting those requirements that were provided from the Corps. So on this slide, we have the proposed site plan. So again, we're only seeing one building, which is highlighted in pink here, but that'll be a 19-unit, 2-story building. The units will be single occupancy units, so they'll only allow or only be set up for one person to live in the units, so much like a studio kind of format. One access is shown on Hickory Street, and again, that will line up with the bus barn site just to the northeast there. Parking, they're showing parking kind of oriented to the back of the building. They're showing 22 stalls within their site plan. Per code, from a multifamily standpoint, we're deficient by 16 stalls to meet the 2-per-1 ratio. However, this is a little bit different of a user, and with these only being single occupancy units, there's also going to be a clause within the leasing agreements that occupants can't have more than one vehicle with that, but also it has been iterated to us that not all occupants within this building will have a vehicle, and then only having one on-site staff person. It would appear that the parking provision would be able to sustain this type of use, and the zoning would reflect that too, if we all feel comfortable in the direction that it's going. The other piece to that too is there are some transit opportunities here with Southwest Transit. They have engaged them in previous conversation in terms of how this building could be serviced or what services they could use from Southwest Transit to be a resource for the occupants. And they laid out some of that information as a part of the overall packet. They are proposing an extension of the sidewalk system, so it currently stubs off basically where the end of the flood channel is. So they would show the extension of that up to the intersection of Hickory and Chaska Boulevard. The site will gain direct access onto that system and provide kind of the internal pedestrian walkways within. And then the other kind of big piece, we still understand that this would need to provide for a level of amenities and usable open space, much like a multifamily building. They have shown a patio area that's basically on kind of the north east portion of the building that the residents would be able to utilize. So it's a matter of kind of figuring out other spaces that could be created with this site. It is a nice site in terms of some of the natural characteristics here. You know, even with the ponding out there, are there ways to kind of help bolster the usable open space provision of the site to be able to meet the requirements out there? So one of those things to work on moving forward. Here's a couple renderings of the building they're proposing. So again, it's 2 stories. The look of it, they went for more of a residential look to kind of fit in with some of the residential happening to the south. The building materials that they have proposed will be a mix of glass, face brick in a color that's reminiscent of Chaska, and then siding applications, both shake siding and board and batten. So moving forward, they'll need to meet our building design and materials ordinance for multifamily. With the materials laid out, it appears that they're going in that direction. And then kind of with this building being pretty exposed on Hickory and the corner of Chaska Boulevard, just having that 360-degree architecture application applied all the way through. Nothing to really touch on that. It's more so just a general point. And then a couple floor plans if we need to look at those, but pretty standard layout here in terms of studio spaces. So I think the major thing to work on for preliminary from a planning standpoint is to really get to that usable open space requirement and see what other opportunities exist on the site that can really, again, be bolstered to provide a nice area for those residents to take advantage of. So with that, we are asking you to recommend approval of the concept plan for West Creek Apartments, and then based on the conditions that are listed in your staff report. We do have the applicant here. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Who, and maybe Dave has to answer this, I don't know, who, the on-staff person, yeah, who do they work for?
I'll let him answer that.
Do I have to come up?
Yeah, come on.
Okay. Get all the technology. So
Dave, give us your
Okay,
further.
I'm Dave Picardi. I'm with Community Asset Development Group, and we represent the ultimate owner, which is the Community Asset Foundation. Relative to the question of on-staff people, may I give you a structure of how this will work, and then it'll answer, I think, your question. So it's owned by our nonprofit. We will be hiring, and we have an agreement in place with the CAP agency to be the site property manager. They manage two similar that they're homeless or not just for youth, the other two that they manage. But so they have experience as a property manager. And then we will also be in contracting with Launch Ministry to provide the staff's or the on-site case management support. Technically not counseling, although that's what it is. And the staffing, we will have somebody on-site 24/7. Some of that time, it will be one of the counselors. Our budget has funding for 2 full-time counselors or case management people. And then we have a project, an employee that with CAP, that'll be there 2 days a week. And then we will have another person that we haven't figured out exactly who's going to be who they're going to work for. They're either going to be an employee of CAP or they're going to be an employee of Launch, and that person will do the overnight and weekend times, and that person will live on site. I know that's a little complicated, but this, let me just say, relative to that, it's one of the changes as this has evolved. I think that's a significant improvement. It really came out of the work that we've been doing with the state, who is funding the majority of the project. The project itself the building is roughly $4 million. There's another $3 million that we have to have in place before we can start to cover operating losses through the 30 years, because people that are living in the unit are not going to be paying enough rent to support, not only that they won't support the debt, but it won't support the operations with the kind of staffing that we're doing. So we have $6.6 million. It's fully committed now, that funding. We haven't closed on the financing yet, but that will allow then the funding of that 24-hour staff.
Could you remind us what you think the ideal turnaround time would be from, somebody entering to finding them permanent?
That's a little, we can't put a condition on that.
Right,
So
yeah,
that's
no. It's more of just.
I know. So
So
here's what the experience, there are 2 other similar projects this in the Twin Cities. One's in Edina, that one's 36 units, and there's one in Egan, 24 units. Their average is about 20 months. Now, some have been there, the one in Egan, which has been up a while, some of those tenants have been there since it opened. But that seemed like it's a fair kind of number. So if you think about it, well, let me just think. If I were 25 and I was homeless, actually, I would have a lot of issues. I would have, because I probably would have been in jail. I could have done a lot of things at that time when I was 25. So if somebody comes out of that situation of being homeless, some will need a longer period of time to transition, get a job, get other things in place in their lives. But at the same time, I'm not sure that once I'm kind of gone through that process, I'm going to want to live in a efficiency with somebody who once a week I have to report to as my case manager. So there will be an incentive. Part of our commitment with the local funders, we've actually raised $180,000 locally. 18 different businesses and individuals have been sponsored to sponsor each of the units. And part of our commitment is that if people need it, they'll be furnished. And when they leave, they can take all the furniture and all the bedding and dishes and those kind of things so that they can move on and live in a more traditional place. So I can tell you, I think that if Corey was here from launch, he would say he thinks it'll be less than 20 months. You know, one of the things that's changed in this is we went from the 2 buildings to the 1. The kind of some of the reasons for that is first in the concept plan, that approval that came out, whatever, 18 months ago, a long time ago. One of the conditions was that we meet the 125-foot setback rather than the 100-foot setback. That reduced the size of the 26-unit building by 6 units. Secondly, as we did the detailed work on the storm sewer, we found that the pond that was there wasn't going to be big enough, and we needed to do the underground storage and treatment, which added about $300,000 to the project. And as Liz said, we started in the detailed discussions with the Corps, and that actually was going to comply with what their requirements were going to be. We were going to lose another 6 units on the 26-unit building. So that just started to shrink down. And then lastly, we finished up the rest of our soil borings. And it turns out the soils, particularly where the original 18-unit or 16-unit building was going to be, those soils are worse than what we anticipated. So we would have liked to be able to do the whole project. We just found it wasn't going to be economically viable, and we couldn't do it and meet the standards of the city. But at the same time, making those changes has allowed us to do, we think, a better job on the ponding. It'll all be surface ponding now. That'll allow us then not to have as much disruption of the wooded area, which is on the kind of southeast corner. I wish this thing was sitting, wasn't so kitty-wampus. And then it'll allow us to have a much more of a usable front yard, active open space. The building design, you know, just so you, we've actually submitted now for the preliminary building and site plan, so we have all of that into the staff for your, I expect you'll see us at the next meeting. The conditions and the comments that have come from the staff, I think we've addressed all of them. And as Liz pointed out, the one we just need to clarify kind of how we're going to create open space. It's not an area I'm concerned about. We have a lot of open space on the site. And we've also finished up much more details on the building. One of the conditions or goals of our foundation board was they were not interested in addressing this issue by going and buying an old apartment building and refurbishing it. They said, why would we go out and take away affordable housing to make more affordable housing? And then secondly said, we have a goal that when it opens, we want to hear somebody complain that it's too nice for people coming out of homelessness. And this will be a very nice building. It's Chaska brick, glass. The interiors will be the kind of quality that you'd say, I would live here. And hopefully we can do it all within our budget. That's been one of the other challenges. You can imagine we priced this out in May of 2020, priced it out again in October of 21, and it was significantly more expensive. We have just recently, though, worked with the state and got approvals for our new budget. Carver County has committed an additional $600,000. And so, although we don't talk a lot about the partnership with the CDA, they are clearly a partner in this project. So we're really very excited about getting this done. I tell people that it's just not right that we live in the richest county in the state of Minnesota, and as of today, there are 46 young adults who are either homeless or in very short-term temporary housing in our community. And that seems like it's an issue that we just need to address. Our long-term goal is to have a situation where we don't have any tenants, because everybody will have found a home and they don't need this place. Other than that, again, we concur with the comments that the staff has. And if you have any other questions, I'm prepared to answer those. People have asked about schedule. We hope to have final city approvals in like the end of March, or at least the zoning by the end of March. And that based on that schedule, we're looking to break ground in like August of this year. And we'll open in the late spring, summer of 23.
All right.
Yeah, no,
Thanks, Dave.
yeah,
Appreciate
thank
that.
you. We've seen, iterations of this, like you've said, this has been a long-going project. It's evolved, there's certain things not in your control, and, it's a really nice plan right now. I think it's probably the best one that we've seen, having the on-site staff kind of puts the bow on it for me, where I think that's just, it's great. It's unfortunate we have homeless, anybody in our community, and now we're trying to help a targeted segment, the young adult, give them a place, as you said, that they're probably going to be really proud to be a part of, because it's a fantastic looking building in the renderings right now. So great project. Thank you.
Great plan, Dave.
And I think
And
it's
again,
important.
appreciate the comment about the 24 hour. I'll just say that came from the state, and the state gave us additional money to partially fund that. Turns out it wasn't enough, and so we had to go back to them and get the approval for this extra unit, and that just occurred last week. So we know now that we have state approval, who is the main funder of this.
Thanks, Dave. And it's important that this happens in Chaska. I mean, we should show
then if it's-
leadership in the county.
And since it's such a good project, maybe I won't be the last one on the agenda after 3 controversial items on the planning commission.
You'll have to
I've
talk.
been to these
You'll have
kind of
to talk
meetings
to Liz
before.
about that. Somebody's got to be last, Dave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Liz, I do have one question, and hopefully, this is, kind of going back to Dave's thing, where it's like, hopefully, it gets to the point where it's not needed.
Right.
The parking. Obviously, the parking is restricted just to what the use is of the building, but in preliminary, are they going to be forced to show the potential where parking could go if, obviously, if the stars align and it's not needed anymore and they decide to sell, they're going to need parking for the new use, so.
Well, or if there's single people, apartments, but
Right.
What if mom and
It's a great question,
dad
and-
come to visit them some weekend or
absolutely.
any of the?
Because we require
Right.
everybody to show proof of parking. Is
And
that the
I
case
would,
for
I
this?
would say if you feel strongly on that, we can absolutely require that as a condition of approval to have a proof of parking plan to show that. The other thing too is, when we do get to the preliminary stage, we will be going through a rezoning that will restrict the use of the property and the parking as well, specific to this use. So if there's discomfort about it changing, well, they would have to go through a zoning ordinance amendment and the proper site planning approvals for us to kind of vet that out appropriately.
And like I said, it's more of
It's a really good question, and we've had this discussion at staff level. I'll tell you two things that's happening, though. For one, remember, they're all efficiencies.
Yep.
So even if they became market rate efficiencies, you're still going to have only one car. You're only going to have one person living in that efficiency. And that can be set up as part of the management agreement. It will be part of our lease that we manage who have cars. The bigger answer, though, so let me explain to you the financing. It's a 30-year lease, or 30-year mortgage, zero interest, no principal payments for the first 30 years. And if after the 30 years, we agree to keep it as an affordable as it is, they waive the principal. So there's a certainty it'll stay in this use for 30 years. And, a high probability that it will be permanently this type of use. And as I said, our mission from the foundation is to be able to partner with local partners so that who are, this is their role, is to do affordable housing, and so that's why we're involved with CAP, that's why we're involved with the CDA, and we've got a tentative agreement with the CDA that we're going to put the site into the land trust, which they manage, and that will give them the option in the future to buy it. And we don't expect to sell it and make any money, put it that way. So I think long-term you're going to see that this evolves into a public housing ownership type piece, and if the homelessness need goes away, there will be other needs. But who knows what 30 years will bring. But for 30 years, it's very much a guaranteed this will be the use.
Definitely helps, thank you.
Just because I don't want it to get missed, we do have someone online who has their hand raised. So if you want to speak to them before making other comments.
All right. Doreen? Doreen, can you hear us? Go ahead, please.
She needs to be unmuted first, which,
You are
Michelle, if
unmuted.
you're able to do that, that'd be great. Yeah, there we go.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I live one block from the site, and I'm concerned about a patio being in front of the building because I know that when young adults get together, they like to get loud, and I would really prefer that all the open space go to the back of the building. That's not under consideration, but it is important to me, and there are a number of other houses also within one block that would be impacted by a patio out in front if there are loud gatherings there.
All right, is that it, Doreen?
And someone assure me that I've made a point.
We heard you, and the applicant heard you as well, as did staff. And at this point, we're at the concept level, so your concerns will be taken into account during the next step of the process.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Just a couple of comments. First off, I want to know your contact information for your mortgage lender. But I think it's a great project, and hopefully, 10 years from now, you come back to us and say, we need to change the use because we don't need this anymore. That would be the goal there. Beautiful to have this in our community.
I agree, totally. All right, I would, if there's no more comments, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the concept plan for West Creek Apartments, pending satisfaction of the 11 items listed by staff.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, all right. Thank you, Mr. Picorni, appreciate your input tonight, and great project.
All right.
So, all right, well, on to other business, which is just reading in the other meetings. Let's receive in the October 4th draft of the EDA meeting minutes and the November 1st draft of the November 15th city council meeting minutes. I guess that's it. Anybody have any comments before we shut her down? No? All right. Liz and Kevin, thank you for, that was a lot of stuff tonight. Let's try to cut that down for just.
If there was a way I could do that, I would, but
Might not get your wish.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can't promise a better month next.
I would like to say, Liz, you do a great job of outlining the concepts. I mean, it shows a real depth of knowledge. I know you put it together, but it's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Why do we have to be such a great city that everybody wants to be? All right, that being said, before I say anything that'll get me in trouble, let's have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. We are adjourned.